You're watching 535.
This is 535.
You're watching 535.
You're watching 535.
You're watching 535.
We're live from the Capitol, and 535 starts right now.
Good morning. It's Thursday, June 4th. Welcome to 535. National reporter for Notice. Most dates in history contain multiple significant events. Very few of those historical events share the same date where you can also draw a straight line to the person who has some connection to those dates. Joining me for a look at June 4th is Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi. Welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
A lot, you can look through and find some amazing things that happened on June 4th around the world. One that California Governor Jerry Brown signed the Agriculture Labor Relations Act. Farm workers getting collective bargaining rights. There was there are three June 4ths that I want to really go through with you to talk about sort of your career. Starting with June 4th, 1919, the U.S. Congress approves the 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution, guaranteeing suffrage for women, and sends it to the states for ratification. If you look back on where women's rights were, where women's participation in politics were, to think back just to when you were in high school or even in college, and how much it has grown now. How do you think about that as somebody who has, seen this firsthand?
Well, it's pretty exciting that the Congress passed that legislation that would then go to the states, end up in Tennessee, where a mom weighed in with her son legislator to vote, the decisive vote for that. So a mom weighing in on a woman's right to vote. That was about freedom, about our Constitution, that our founders had the wisdom to make the Constitution amendable. Because, of course, well, for some reason they didn't think the country was ready for women to have the right to vote, or black men, or anything. And, of course, that from that time on, from the time of the Constitution, freedom was always expanded. But it wasn't because people waited for it, it's because women acted. Whether it was in Seneca Falls in the middle of the 19th century, and all the work being done to pass that legislation. What's interesting to me, though, as a member of Congress, is that Jeannette Rankin, the first woman to serve in Congress, she came to Congress before women nationally had the right to vote. She came in fact in time to vote against our entry into World War I. Mm-hmm. She lost after that. Then she came back to Congress to vote against our entry into World War II. But just an act of her belief in peace and the rest. Now, that date is very important to us. When I came to Congress, there were only 23 women in Congress, 11 Republicans, 12 Democrats.
Now, does that include the Senate also?
I'm just talking about the House.
The House, okay.
Oh, there was like one in the Senate.
Yeah, it was like Barbara Mikulski.
Yeah. And she was really one of the first to be elected in her own right, not a widow following the footsteps of a spouse or something like that. But good for her. And Emily's List emerged at that time, too, and that as an outside force. But when I went there, I was former chair of the California Democratic Party. I said, this is ridiculous. 435 people, 535 to your name, if you count the Senate, and so few women. So we made a decision, and now we have 96 Democratic women in the House, and we want more.
Okay, let's back up though and think. You're growing up in a household where the men were politicians. Your father was a congressman and then mayor. Your older brother, Thomas, went on to be mayor. At what point did you begin to realize, not just that, not 1986 or 87, but at what point did you look around and say, you know what, women can actually do this too? And was there somebody, was it when you were a staffer here in your 20s? When did that sort of light
It never
go on?
happened. I had absolutely no interest in being in the public eye. I loved our advocacy for issues, the policies of the Democratic Party, the candidates, the causes, and I loved being chair of the party in California, but I'd never myself thought that I would be in the public arena. I never did. But when I grew up in a political family, my mother was very active with the organization of women, the voting, the volunteers, and the rest of that. So I've always been a politician who says, if you want to win the election, own the ground. That means respect the volunteers, the VIPs, the volunteers in politics, largely women. But no, I never did until I was approached to run for Congress. I had to think about it. I asked my daughter, I had 5 children in 6 years, 4 of them were in college. One of them was going to senior year in high school, and I asked her, I said, Mommy has been asked to run for Congress. I've never aspired to that. I've never, wasn't interested at all. I love my life here, and but I've been asked, so I wouldn't go forward unless you thought it was okay. I'll be gone like 3 nights a week if I were to win, which I don't know if I will. I said, Mother, get a life. What teenage girl would not want her mother out of the house 3 nights a week? So that was her freedom.
Was that Christine? Or
No, it was Alexandra,
Alex? Oh,
Alexandra,
yeah.
the youngest, yeah.
She has a lot of personality.
She does.
But what were those early days like, being one of just 23? Did you form really close bonds when you're talking about just 24 of you who were here, and you're looking at 390, almost 400 other men?
Yeah.
No, more than 400.
Yeah. So, well, it was. I was fortunate because my colleague from San Francisco is Barbara Boxer, and she was like a sister to me. And I mean, after I won, she had to be neutral in the election, but after I won, she was a big help to me, and I loved her very much. And I had known, because I was active in the Democratic Party, Lindy Boggs very well.
Sure.
And Lindy had said to me early on, know your power. I said to her one day, you know, Lindy, I'm chair of the party, I'm chair of the host committee for the convention, trying to get the convention. I'm chair of the delegate selection compliance review commission. I think I have too many titles. She said, darling, no man would ever say that. Know your power and use it. So she was here and very protective of me when I came, because she and her husband served with my father and mother. And I say with my father, they came to Congress around the same time.
Yeah. So that's where you got Know Your Power from. We heard that many, many times at press conferences.
Yeah.
So flashing forward to that sort of epic leadership race that you and Mr. Hoyer engaged in, and sort of took several years and a couple of elections almost to reach its conclusion. How many women were there at that point in, was that 2001, 2002, in the Democratic caucus? How many, because it was still a small number, right? Or,
Well, no, we had elected many more women. I don't know exactly what the number was that day, but there were more women, but we're about halfway to where we are now.
Okay.
Yes, and if there weren't so many women, we wouldn't have had a woman speaker, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Because at the time when I was just running for whip, and actually that was not that long, actually, because the whip, David Bonner, said he was running for governor of Michigan, so he stepped aside, so I said I would run. But in that race, at that time, the men said, who said she could run? As if, poor babies, that they thought I would wait for them to say I could run. And then they said, why don't the women just write on a piece of paper the kind of things they want us to do and we'll do them for you? That's in this century. That's in this century. Again, poor babies.
Poor babies.
But I knew I would win. So I did say to them, don't vote for me because I'm a woman, and don't vote against me because I'm a woman. But I want you to know how I see how we can take back the House based on our values, bringing people together.
How has that changed, having so many women in Congress? Policy-wise, there are at the start of this Congress, there were at least 30 Republican women.
Yeah,
and
they've
their
come along.
numbers are up. They were down after your 2018 beatdown of Republicans. They were down into single digits. They now are up to 30. So
That's good.
you know, how does that affect policy around here by having so many more women, and you're actually getting women who have chairmanships?
That's right.
What does that do to this place in terms of actual outcomes?
Well, it's internal and it's external. The fact is, though, when we were electing women, I was saying to them, I want you to have a security credential. I have 30 years of intelligence.
Yes.
I was the first person in the leadership, as far as anybody can measure, that had a security credential. There was agriculture and infrastructure and all that among men, but I was the first one to have. So I wanted the women to have a security credential, whether it was armed services, foreign affairs, intelligence, appropriations, or oversight committee, subcommittees of all of that, because I wanted the public to see women, as important as some of the family issues are, and they're about the strength of our country. I wanted to see them as decision makers at that level. I wanted them to also have economic credentials on committees of jurisdiction that determined our economy, so that people saw women capable of the full array of our issues. And that has happened. And when I became Speaker, I immediately appointed women to all the positions that I had the authority to do, and helped other women win further appointments.
You also have that moment where you first took the Speaker's gavel in 2007, and you surrounded yourself with the children. Members bring their children for swearing-in day, and there were dozens, if not, 100 or so, just all up in the
Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah. Does that make a difference, having women in power, in terms of children's issues?
Well, of
Do
course.
women understand it in a better way?
Women outside the Congress are so excited to see women who share their experience making decisions that affect their lives. That's why I was so happy to have so many younger women coming in who were raising children. Mine was sequential. My kids were high school, college by the time I came. To see young women, again, who share their responsibility, who have to balance work and family, and of course focus on the children. So it isn't that women, I always say this to the men, no offense, it isn't that women are better than men. It's just that we have to be at the table, at least in the same respect. And not just at the table, a seat at the table, but a seat at the head of the table. Having a gavel made a very big difference in how people perceive women.
You used to say that it was, in some ways, probably harder to get elected Speaker as a woman because the elective body was three-quarters, 85% men here in the House than it would be to be elected president.
A woman.
As a woman, do you, now that you've seen this in 2 elections where 2 women have lost, when does that glass ceiling get broken?
Well, and here it was a marble ceiling, because their pecking order in the Congress was always about you're next, you're next, you're next, all men. And that's when they said, you're breaking into the line. I said, really? This line has been here for over 200 years. Yeah. Move over, it's over. But I did think that because of the, shall we say, male orientation of the Congress of the United States, that it would be harder for a woman to be elected Speaker than President, because I thought the public was much more receptive to a woman president. And I do think that we will have a woman president, and it will be sometime soon.
Okay. All right, there's another June 4th that is very important to you, and especially your early days in Congress. June 4th, 1989, the crackdown on Tiananmen Square. San Francisco is home to such a large Chinese population. What did that day mean to you? And what did you try to do in those early days to push back against China?
Well, when that happened, we had a big rally in San Francisco that night. As soon as that was obvious, it's hard to tell the dates because some of the Tiananmen Square slaughter in our time was the third here. It was still early here. We had a big rally in San Francisco. Now, San Francisco has mainland and Taiwan.
Yes.
And so, but everybody came together on that night. And that, from my standpoint, earlier than that, I had met the Dalai Lama when I was a new member of Congress. And to me, it was like, meeting the Pope. It was so overwhelming and inspiring and strengthening and encouraging. So I had my views on suppression in China, whether it was in the part of China that is Tibet, whether it's the rest of the country. And we were hopeful about some of the speaking out that people were doing till they just crushed them under tanks. And so it was just intolerable. But what the problem is that our administration, and I love George Herbert Walker Bush, but he had been not an ambassador because we didn't have one, then a representative in China. So I respected his knowledge and regard for China. But just when we thought there'd be some real statement about what they had done, crushed people under tanks, students who had a goddess of democracy modeled after our Statue of Liberty, that they sent one of the representatives right over there within a matter of weeks, toasting the government that had done that and said, there are those who will come between us. We won't let that happen. So that to me just provoked
You ended up,
action.
on the second year anniversary of June 4th, you ended up in Tiananmen with a couple of other members.
Yes.
You were detained by the
Well, we weren't
police there?
detained because we ran faster than they did. But we were there in Tiananmen Square to pay tribute to those who have, and we still have, all these years later, over 35 years later, still want justice for the victims of Tiananmen. They protested in San Francisco last night. My daughter was part of that. But we went there 2 years later. We unfurled a banner in memory, honoring those who spoke out for democracy in China. And then all of a sudden, right nearby in Tiananmen, there's the People's Congress. All these troops came out of the building and they came running after us. But what's funny is when we were there were lots of tourists, Chinese tourists, and they were acting very friendly. But what we realized is then they took out their things and they called the police.
Secret police.
They were secret police. And they came running after us. Some of the members got hit with bullet clubs. It's a question of who you can run faster than the police or faster than your colleague who will be the first line of defense with the police. And they took the film, they took all that. It was terrible. It was really terrible, yeah.
Moving forward to June 4th, 2019, it's your second run as Speaker, and that was the day that the House passed the DREAM Act, a landmark bill to give permanent legal protections to dreamers. If you look back at your career, you did a lot of things and you accomplished a lot of things on your key issues. The Affordable Care Act. In 2022, you got a big down payment on climate change and the environment, which you always called sort of a hallmark issue. Is the fact that didn't get across the finish line, immigration and a DREAM Act or some path to citizenship, is that sort of a one gnawing regret?
Well, my biggest regret is that we have not passed what we need to do on gun violence protection in our country. But getting back to June 4th, each day that you talked about women having the right to vote, freedom of expression in Tiananmen Square being suppressed, and freedom for these dreamers to be in the U.S. and be the gold standard of immigrants coming to our country. They're all about freedom. It's one thing here.
Yes.
It's springing from our Constitution in many ways and our value system. So on that, we passed it in the House again and again. So we did what we needed to do. It was the Senate that has the problem because of their rules. So I was disappointed in them,
Yeah.
but not disappointed in the courage of our members to vote for that. Later, when we were trying to do it again, when I did it before, it was Nydia Velasquez was the chair of the Hispanic Caucus, and Lucille Robin-Allard was the author of the bill. So I said to the Hispanic Caucus, you have to tell the members what this means to you. And they were very successful in doing that, and we passed it again and again. Dick Durbin was the champion in the Senate, but the Senate rules don't let me go into that. Then later when we were trying again, I had my 8.5-hour speech in high heels on the floor of the House. And I didn't mean to speak that long. I just went to make my pitch, thought maybe it'd be an hour or something. But people kept bringing me letters from their constituents. And even the Senate sent over letters so that we were able to have firsthand testimony as to what was happening in our country, the contribution our dreamers were making. It's different from the Senate because if you are commanding the floor with your special minute that I had, you can't take a break. See, over there you can yield to somebody else.
Yes, yeah.
You can take a break while somebody else speaks and that. But on our side, it has to just be one person or else you relinquish your time.
That is the power of the magic minute
given
given to the speaker and minority leader and majority leader. Okay, we have a thing here called 535 1 minute. It's not a magic minute, so just a couple of quick questions. If you could fix one thing about Congress, what would it be?
I think it's really important for the public to be more aware of what happens here. Our founders believed, you said just quickly, I just think there's any steps to connect more fully with the American people because that's what a democracy is about.
Okay. Who's the smartest member of Congress?
I'm too much of a politician to answer that question.
All right.
I am going to speak at Barney Frank's funeral on Monday, though I would say he'd be in stiff competition for
Okay.
that.
Who's the favorite Republican that you ever served with?
Well, again, that's a political question. I love the Doles. I love the family, the Bush family, father and mother and son and Laura. While we had disagreements, I fought Father Bush on China for years, but I loved him very much. They were patriots. That's a different thing than what we have now. They were patriots when you have disagreement, but nonetheless. And of course, I love the Doles.
Okay.
So I could speak for a minute. I thought it was just like one word thing.
What's the best food in your district?
Best food?
Best restaurant?
Oh gosh, you're asking all these political questions. Please, you get me in trouble. They're all so good in every nationality that you can think of. We have every food in the world because we have everybody in the world in our district. Every nationality, every religion or not. But again, we have that beautiful community.
All right. Well, thank you very much for being here. This is 535, and we'll be right back.
You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
A simple blood test can detect Alzheimer's years before symptoms appear. Congress can connect Americans to early, accurate dementia diagnosis by supporting the Bipartisan Alzheimer's Screening and Prevention Act, allowing Medicare to cover blood-based Alzheimer's screening. Congress has acted to cover mammograms and other life-saving screenings. Now it can redefine Alzheimer's care, unlocking early detection and access to FDA-approved treatments when they work best. Congress, it's up to you. Paid for by the Alzheimer's Association.
This intolerable dependence on foreign oil is a clear and present danger to our nation.
We will not return to the days of gas lines.
I have repeatedly called for more energy independence for America.
I urge Congress to pass legislation that makes America more secure and less dependent on foreign energy.
After years of talking about it, we're finally poised to control our own energy future.
From energy independence in America.
We will have energy independence and energy dominance.
Lights on energy. Energy dominance starts now.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Rome. I've played many roles on TV and film, but today I want to speak to you as myself about a cause that's very dear to my heart. The Cancer Prevention and Treatment Fund provides free help to those who have cancer and those who wish to prevent it. They've also worked tirelessly on banning cancer-causing chemicals in our homes and neighborhoods. I want to thank them as a mom for protecting our families. Please donate today at the Cancer Prevention and Treatment Fund at stopcancerfund.com.
All right, Luke, so tell us about how the sausage is made.
Well, generally, the issue is that so much of what's happening in various local economies is shaped by federal policy here in Washington. You know, what we're trying to do is really get at these sort of various advocacy groups and institutions that work sort of behind the scenes.
What we're talking about at 535 is sort of the sausage-making process, and it's not just the members on the Hill and their staff. It's the advocacy organizations, it's the trade organizations, it's the grassroots, it's the regular Americans, the business owners back home. This is the type of content that we're going to have on 535 that you're not going to find anywhere else.
Absolutely, yeah.
Welcome back to 535. I'm Leanne Caldwell with Puck News, and right now I am joined with Congressman Nathaniel Moran from Texas and Senator Todd Young of Indiana. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us.
We're going to talk, it's a bicameral legislation that you guys have about apprenticeships. So first tell me, how did you two get connected on this issue?
Well, I think we're both passionate about workforce. And for me in particular, the origin of this bill came from just a roundtable back in my district in Texarkana and then visiting industries in Tyler where the workforce issue continually came up. And they said, you know what, we want to do apprenticeships, but apprenticeships are so expensive and the need to actually help employers keep some of their tax dollars to reimburse for these expensive apprenticeships is very critical.
And how did you get involved in this, Senator Moran? Or Senator, yes, Senator
That's
Young.
all right, that's all right. Well, for starters, I'm glad to work with Nathaniel on this. Word has gotten around that Nathaniel is passionate about workforce issues. I tasked my team recently to look into some of the disruption that's going to happen with AI, consider some of the worst case scenarios, and then see what ideas industry can bring to us to train the next generation of workers as people are disrupted from their current patterns of work. And one of the things that we heard time and again, and I think that the future will demonstrate the wisdom of this, is we need to listen to the employers because they're on the front line of this disruption, give them the flexible tools they need to establish new programs. And apprenticeships have been around for generations, but they can be applied to this new AI-enabled age, and that's really important. I'd also say the state of Indiana has been doing apprenticeships for a number of years now, and really emphasizing that as the most manufacturing-intensive state in the country tries to adapt to this new technologically enabled age.
I'm going to talk to you about AI, but first, Congressman Moran, what role, you're a Republican, what role does government have when it comes to incentivizing or encouraging apprenticeships?
Well, I think you just hit the nail on the head about trying to start the conversation about what's our role, because our role is certainly not to, from DC, try to shape these apprenticeships back home. I believe in local control. What we want to be able to do is empower our local businesses, our local communities, our local community colleges to get together and to say what works for our businesses, what works for our needs here locally, and to shape the apprenticeship program that they want. We didn't try to redefine what an apprenticeship program was. We said, look, you can either use a state apprenticeship program definition or a federal apprenticeship definition, which encompasses more than 1,000 different types of industries, or if it's even under a CBA, collective bargaining agreement, if it's an apprenticeship program under a CBA. We want you to shape it the way that you need to for your own industry and for your own local economy. But here in DC, what we can do is empower you by letting you keep more of your hard-earned dollars for businesses to say, we want to reinvest it in ourselves and in the next generation of our workforce.
So it's tax incentives, essentially.
That's exactly what it is.
Okay.
We're talking about a tax credit. We're talking about up to $5,000 per apprentice per quarter and up to $2,500 per apprentice per quarter in expenses. So the first $5,000 is for the wages of the apprentice, and the next $2,500 is for the expense of the program. That could be a partnership with a community college. That could be the distance learning. That could be the on-site running of a program. That could be the mentor wages themselves. All these expenses that are hurdles to apprenticeship programs happening, we break down those barriers by letting them keep their own tax dollars.
Yeah. Senator, you talked about the influx of AI.
Yes.
So can you talk about, do you see the economy, the job structure changing more to these blue collar, which I think is an outdated term these days?
Yeah,
but,
right.
But those sorts of jobs are going to become even more important in this new unknown world we're moving into?
Well, let me, in an act of senatorial humility, let me say I don't know. But my best guess is we're actually going to see more disruption from some of the jobs that have historically been called white-collar jobs, right? Those who deal with words and data for a living as opposed to working in the physical environment. So we think apprenticeships can apply in those sorts of scenarios and be force multipliers. But what's brilliant and elegant about this model is it applies to more traditional jobs, from construction to manufacturing to transportation, but also to some of these new jobs that will come online. We leave it to the employers to take advantage of this payroll tax credit. And we use a payroll tax to add to the parameters that Nathaniel laid out, because so many young companies and small companies don't have the income tax liability or don't have the revenue that the income tax credit would be particularly helpful to them. So if you use a payroll tax tool, then you suddenly help small firms. And the key to economic development in this age is to get more people starting small firms and to have those firms succeed.
Yeah, I will say on a personal level, we had to get new HVAC in our house, and those people are so busy. There must be a shortage. It is so hard to get them scheduled and to get them, and they have emergencies. It's just really fascinating. And my husband and I have been talking a lot about how it seems like there's such a greater need as well for these types of jobs.
I think so many other families talk about that too, and talk about how expensive it is to get someone to visit your home. And I sort of celebrate that as a society, we now recognize, and I think a more active way than we have in recent history, the contributions of people who fix things in your house and install things. That's such important expertise. We want to build more of those workers for people who want that sort of job.
We absolutely do. Senator Young and I were talking earlier about our kiddos and their post-high school, and so many families are having these discussions with their kids as they transition to adulthood. And one of the discussions is, hey, what's your call in life? What is it that you're passionate about? And what are you really good at? Because we don't want to pigeonhole kids to go down directions that they're not called to do. We want people to live out the American dream the way that they're called to do individually. And those are much different paths for every little child. And so we want to give them the opportunity to pick that path path and benefit and to get return on their investment. A lot of that is the discussion in our household is, all right, what are you going to do now to prepare for a long-time career? What kind of return on investment are you going to make or have for the choice that you make? And an apprenticeship program provides a great return on your investment.
Yeah, we're having the same conversations. We want my 13-year-old, when he's a little older, to follow our contractor around for a few days and like start to learn how to do that work and stuff. So anyways.
That's right.
Yeah.
One final point that I think is important to emphasize is these training programs, these sort of plug and play training programs, apprenticeships, have very high completion rates, and I think that's probably because you earn a wage while you're going through the apprenticeship programs. And then on the back end of it, longer term, you have much higher wages once you complete these programs. So they are proven, they're stress tested. We just need to scale and apply them perhaps to some either new sectors or sectors that are changing quickly.
Yeah, and Leanne, as we were doing our due diligence on this, we visited some apprenticeship programs. I asked a mentee in a program, what's the best thing that came out of the apprenticeship program you did? And he said, you know what, I learned how to be a better father. I learned how to be a better parent. And a better husband, because he said, I had to learn patience, I had to learn discipline, I had to work with an older workforce member that had been through all the life things that I've been through. So it's not just about learning the skills of the trade, but it's about learning how to become a mature adult in a function society.
Get a lot of parents saying, sign my kid
up. That's exactly right.
I know. So what about immigration? Immigration into this country has shifted a lot in the last year. What sort of role are you all seeing when it comes to these sorts of jobs, and how could it incentivize, less immigration? Could that incentivize an apprenticeship program, or could it impact it at all? Senator Moran, or Senator, oh my gosh.
No, that's all right. We do have a Senator Moran, and who knows, maybe someday he'll aspire to go to the other chamber. But these are co-equal branches, regardless. It's a deviation.
Co-equal, wow, this is the first I've heard a House and Senate agreement here.
Yes. Here's the thing I'll say about the immigration issue is that this solution that we're proposing really is agnostic, in my opinion, to any immigration issues. This is about building the American dream for those folks that have an intention to move down the road, fulfill their calling, but they need the training. Businesses that need the workforce today, and we have the capability of training up kids in our local communities to stay local, to reinvest in those that want to stay where they're at, or to find a new avenue to go. But wherever the opportunity is, we've got to provide businesses an opportunity to get over the hurdles. And the hurdles primarily are financial hurdles to setting up these apprenticeship programs. And so we want to break that down with this tax credit.
Let me take a quick stab at your question this way, though. I am approached by some employers, candidly, who say, I just can't find more workers. I can't find more workers, and they're having some real challenges. And I take that seriously, and this gives them an option. This gives them an option to train some workers in-house and the resources to do so, and then retain them. So for those who have concerns about the competition associated with legal immigration, this provides an avenue to train the next generation of workers. Doesn't mean we can't also invite more people into this country. It's a hard conversation of course, but this ought to be an easy one.
Yeah. What's the path for this legislation? Let's start in the House.
Yeah. Well, I think the path could be potentially a bipartisan tax bill, or maybe even a reconciliation package where there's a tax chapter to it. That certainly seems like a pathway forward to me. When I look at this bill, I think it is not just a bicameral, but really a bipartisan issue. This is not about winners and losers if you're on a Republican or Democratic side. This is about making sure that all of our kiddos in all of our congressional districts across the nation, whether or not you're urban or suburban or rural, it doesn't matter. It applies equally, and I think when Democrats start to look at this very closely, they're going to see this is a winner for the kiddos in their districts too.
What about, do you have any Democratic House members who
Yeah,
have
we're
signed
working on that. I mean, the first thing we wanted to do is to roll it out during the apprenticeship week in April, which is what we did. And we were so glad to have a strong partner in the Senate with Senator Young, somebody that has been proven to be a great policymaker. That's what we're about. You know, there's too many members of Congress on both sides of the aisle in both chambers that are really more about sound bites. We're about sound policy. That's what we're about. And so this is a sound policy issue. And so we're thankful we found a good partner over in the Senate.
We will. We'll sign up some Democratic colleagues over in the Senate side. We have some offices currently looking at it. This is not a partisan issue in the slightest. Apprenticeships are used in all 50 states, and it's a proven concept. So I would anticipate this getting fairly broad bipartisan support. There's a member education component to this bill, as with all other bills, but I think it's conceivable we could get it done before year's end.
What's the cost?
We're still getting a final cost number from CBO. We know it's going to have a little bit of a cost factor to it, but I think that's because there's not going to be enough credit given to the growth in the economy by these businesses as they put apprenticeship programs in place. The manufacturing is going to go up. They're going to have more opportunities, again, not to have the transitional costs related to turnover in their businesses. With apprenticeship programs, you're going to get more stability in your employee base. So I think the cost is really going to be negligible at the end of the day, because you're going to see great economic growth tailored with what we did in the One Big Beautiful Bill last year to increase domestic manufacturing. This is going to be really a zero-sum game from a number standpoint, but for local businesses, when you talk about cost, this is the discussion that needs to happen is, what about the cost of the local business that is sending tons of money to Washington, D.C., but now gets to keep a portion of that to shape and grow their business the way they need to? It's their tax dollars. It's not ours. Let them keep it and let them shape these programs.
Or the opportunity costs associated with not upskilling workers who have an opportunity to give even more value to the marketplace, enjoy more value for their families, and have a more rewarding career. So those are significant costs as well. There's a different type of cost, which I think you were alluding to, the one that we talk about here in Capitol Hill. We do need to request a score, and hopefully they'll give us credit for those growth factors. But I know every colleague is getting the same sort of questions from their constituents. What are you doing on workforce? We got this AI age that we're all concerned
AI
about.
Is like the perfect peg, really.
That's
right.
right.
As a journalist to
well, we got to have some answers, both rhetorically and also substantively, and members are looking for something sensible to land on. This is proven, this is sensible, people get it, and I don't think it'll be all that expensive.
And you always have to make the distinction between, is this an expenditure or an investment?
Yes.
And here, this particular bill is an investment in young lives and businesses and the future economic growth of America. It is not just an outlay expense, but it is an investment that will bring back a return.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, so quick, fun, last thing. Our 5:35 1 minute. I'm going to ask you each, what is the best food or restaurant in your district?
Oh,
Texarkana.
I have to say, my hometown of Tyler, Texas, Stanley's Barbecue is well known to be one of the best barbecue places in all of Texas, probably in the United States, and Country Tavern right behind that with the best ribs I think you'll ever eat.
Are you going to go barbecue too?
Yeah, we'll stay in that category.
Everyone goes barbecue.
King Ribs. It's downtown Indianapolis. It's a converted car wash.
Oh, yeah.
This place has a line way out into the road on summer evenings. Nothing better than their barbecued chicken and ribs.
Oh, well, great. Well, thank you guys so much. Senator Young, thank you for taking a break from Votorama. Which is happening right now over in the Senate.
It's our glamorous life in the Senate.
Yeah, what's your prediction? How late is it going to go tonight?
3 a.m. It'll be an easy one.
How did they get agreement? How did they get agreement to start during the day? You know.
I don't know.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And Congressman Moran, thank you both so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And 5:35, we'll be right back.
You're watching 5:35, and we'll be right back.
There are moments that shape an organization's future. A policy shift, a crisis or investigation, a market shock. When that moment hits, the clock starts. Markets move in minutes. Regulators, employees, and customers respond instantly. Narrative helps leaders respond with pace, engage stakeholders with precision, and position brands with perspective. So when challenges emerge, you can navigate complexity and lead with clarity before the narrative is defined for you.
We are Lions International, one association of global volunteers, one foundation for humanitarian grants, shaping the future, one act of kindness at a time. We are on a mission to improve health and well-being, to strengthen communities, to serve a world in need. We are Lions International.
To learn more, visit lionsclubs.org.
National Association of Realtors Advocacy, working to expand access to housing and defend property rights so that more Americans can build generational wealth and prosperity through home ownership, a critical voice in nearly 1/5 of the U.S. economy, supporting 2 jobs for every single-family home sold, and generating more than $760 billion of property tax revenue for state and local governments each year. Realtors are members of the National Association of Realtors.
Congressman Molinaro, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Appreciate you having me.
Can you explain to people where your district is and what kind of district it is? What do they grow in your district? And is that a big job industry in your district? Talk to me about this bill you have. It's called the Farms Act. What exactly is the problem you're trying to solve with this? Is this something that the administration could address on their own, or does it need to require Congress to pass a law to really fix it? Is this bipartisan at all? Do you have Democratic support? So what's the brass tacks here? Who's your counterpart in the Senate, and what is the path forward you see for this legislation?
Oh my gosh. You know, let me think about that.
Who is the hardest lawmaker to track down to get in front of?
My Democratic colleagues will say Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, not because she is so in demand, which I think she is, but because she doesn't take meetings with lobbyists.
What about for the beer industry?
Beer is a bipartisan, nonpartisan issue, and generally speaking, members like to get together over a cold beer. I wish they would do it a little bit more, so we're working on that.
Well, thanks for joining us on 535.
Back on a Thursday, it's Scott McFarland here, 535 News, joined by Ted Lieu, Vice Chair of the House Democratic Caucus, Democratic Congressman from California, also deeply involved in helping Congress work through AI and potentially legislate its way through AI. If you could pass an AI bill yesterday, what's the top thing it would include?
Well, thank you, Scott, for your question. I would make sure that we have adequate testing and disclosure on the most advanced models and make sure they don't do catastrophic things like build a new virus that could cause a pandemic or cyber hack every financial institution and steal people's money.
Who's policing that now other than the industry?
Well, that's the problem, right? And so the Trump administration basically has had a hands-off approach where they've let the industry run wild, and that's caused massive public backlash and harm to Americans. And that's why Leader Jeffries appointed me, as well as Valerie Foushee and Josh Gottheimer, as co-chairs of the Democratic Commission on AI and the Innovation Economy.
And there's a bipartisan group functioning in this space as well, looking at things Congress can do now on AI. There's a balance, though, isn't there, between states regulating and the feds doing so? How do you work that out?
Well, because right now there's been no attempt to put any federal standards, just to suppress state legislation, Democrats have held firm and voted against that, along with a number of Republicans, and we can't preempt with nothing. And so we're going to be working on a framework for next year when Democrats flip the House as to what will be reasonable guardrails on AI. But in the meantime, when there's nothing, states should and need to pass laws to regulate and make AI safe while allowing AI to innovate.
Are there states that have modeled something good that Congress can look at?
Well, so states are laboratories of democracy, and a number of them have good, interesting ideas. Now, ultimately, I do believe we should have federal standards that everyone should follow, but until we get there, we can't just say stop regulating AI.
Is it difficult to have these conversations with the rest of your colleagues because they're not also computer scientists, and some of this really can blur the eyes when you start reading about it?
Now, to be fair, I'm a recovering computer scientist, but having said that, members of Congress, we're generalists, and so I vote over 1,000 times in a 2-year legislative cycle, and a lot of these issues, I'm not an expert. So for example, I don't actually know how a Boeing 737 flies, but I did vote for FAA reauthorization. So as long as you have a understanding of what the bill does and what are their objectives of the bill, and what are the criticisms, then you can, I think, reasonably vote on legislation.
Are there enough, though, people in the House and or Senate that do have a working knowledge of this to get a coalition together that puts a smart piece of legislation on the paper?
So I am one of 3 computer science majors in all of Congress, and there is, I think, not that much folks, both at the staff level and electeds, who have computer science degrees or technical degrees. And that's something that for the future I would like to try to fix. I think we should have more fellowships on Capitol Hill for people who have technical degrees, and I think we need to bring in more people from the private sector as well.
We know your colleague from Virginia, Don Beyer, literally went back to school to study the mathematics behind this because he wanted to be a better partner with people like you.
Don Beyer knows more about linear algebra than most of us have forgotten.
I've forgotten a lot about linear algebra, though. My kids are now in that boat. We were talking about the pitfalls in legislation that just tend to surface. At what point does any conversation about AI legislation dovetail or detour into a conversation about data centers and how people don't want them in their neighborhoods?
So data centers use a lot of energy. The older ones also use a lot of water. They basically mitigated the water issue because the newer ones recycle the water. But they still do use a lot of energy. And so a number of these AI companies have said they will pay more and hold the community harmless to have the data center there. But that's volunteer.
You want to require that?
I think we ought to require it and make sure that the local community is held harmless if they choose to approve a data center.
And there's this other burgeoning fear among young people just about the concept. They think that AI leads to necessary and profound joblessness among young people. How do you button that up when you try to legislate on this?
So it's possible that will happen. In fact, it's likely that AI will cause job disruption. There'll be jobs that are lost. There'll be jobs that are created. And my view is this is something that government traditionally deals with when people get unemployed or lose jobs. And so we have to focus on making sure that folks who lose jobs, for example, don't die of sickness because they can't get health care. So let's make health care more accessible, more affordable. Let's reverse the largest cut to Medicaid in US history by Republicans. Let's reverse the cuts to Medicare, and let's restore the ACA tax credits. So those are things we need to do to help people navigate the AI revolution and make sure that the traditional safety net is still there.
Safety nets have been fraying over the last couple of years. Is how do you sturdy that up? If Democrats get control and get the ability to legislate and command hearings, what do you do to build something that would really be novel, a safety net from AI job disruption?
Well, first of all, we were absolutely focused on healthcare and really stop the massive deep cuts that Republicans and Donald Trump have put in. And healthcare costs are rising. We need to give people cheaper, accessible healthcare. So again, we're going to reverse the Medicaid cuts and Medicare cuts and restore the ACA tax credits. We also want to lower costs across the board for everyone. The Trump tariffs have been devastating in terms of raising costs. We want to stop unconstitutional wars. The war in Iran has jacked up gas prices, and the Strait of Hormuz is still closed, as we sit here today. And so there's a lot to be done when we flip the House to restore America back to the balance it was before this Trump administration came in and messed everything up.
When the time comes for a bipartisan conversation, you and your colleagues on artificial intelligence, where are you aligned? What's the common ground that initially seems there on this issue?
So Jay Obernolte and I introduced legislation earlier this year that is based on the recommendations of the House Bipartisan Task Force on AI. And it's over 200 pages long, and it's got a lot of common sense bipartisan ideas, such as, well, let's at least increase AI literacy. Let's make sure that when we have AI deployed, that people are familiar and know how to use it. Let's get some standards to be set. Let's make sure the federal government takes risk management into account when they deploy AI. Lots of just common sense standards. And let's make sure that we clamp down on AI fraud and AI deepfakes.
There's an argument that the industry, and I suspect the Trump administration is making, that you regulate too much, you legislate too much, you do inhibit innovation. You give our competitors, our geopolitical competitors, a head start if you slow us down. How do you respond when people criticize it that way?
So Republicans in the Trump administration have done literally nothing, right? You can't really name a single major piece of legislation to regulate AI. Now, I think Jay Obernolte might be in a different space. I think House Republican leadership just doesn't want to do anything. And so the balance they're talking about, clearly it's at one end, which is let the AI industry run wild. And the American public are very clearly rejecting that. The American public want reasonable guardrails.
Are other countries doing this better, either the regulating or the incentivizing of the industry?
So a number of states have put in, I think, some good laws. Australia did put in a law that basically said we're not going to let people under 16 do social media. And so I think we also need to look at potentially putting in legislation that stops AI from harming kids. And we don't, for example, want chatbots that are going to tell kids how to commit suicide, right? We can't have that happen.
Do you get any pushback considering the importance of innovation and tech in your district? I mean, you have a disproportionate amount of your district that has some tether to the tech industry. Do they say, hey, don't push us too hard, don't hold us too much back?
So look, the AI industry has done amazing things in terms of helping lots of folks in lots of different sectors of our economy. Johns Hopkins reported that with AI, they were able to reduce sepsis by about 20%. That's one of the major killers of people who go to hospitals. There's AI that's been involved in advanced cures, so people are seeing a lot more cures for a lot more diseases. So AI is saving lives, has saved lives, and will save more lives. And so we want AI to flourish and innovate. At the same time, we need reasonable guardrails so we don't have data centers harming local communities. We don't have kids that end up committing suicide because of chatbots. We don't have AI that can tell someone how to build a virus that's going to destroy the world. So we need to put in reasonable guardrails.
A couple topical policy issues over the past week. You have some colleagues, including on the House Committee on Administration, looking at how the federal government can better oversee elections or its role in elections. You have some colleagues questioning why it's so slow in California to tabulate votes, which creates a petri dish for all kinds of conspiratorial nonsense. Can your state do it better? What could Congress do to look at states like California to improve things?
Yeah. So California, like a number of other states, have made sure that people who want to vote can vote and that their votes are going to be counted. And it is true that we are slower, and I do encourage the legislature and the new governor to speed up the process. But at the same time, you just want to make sure that people's votes are counted. And yes, that does take a while, but I do think we can speed it up.
What do you make of the conspiracy theories that necessarily emanate over slower counts?
Oh yeah, they're just false. And by the way, even today as we sit here, no one can explain how allegedly the Joe Biden election was somehow stolen from Donald Trump. I mean, was it like Venezuela doing it? Was it some Italian space satellite? Was it something weird from North Korea? Donald Trump still today can't tell you how that happened because he's just lying.
And there still are questions, including just yesterday at a hearing in which members are asking Trump cabinet members about the 2020 election. That stuff just lingers around here like a bad stench. We have some fast break questions for you, Congressman Lieu, on a much more joyful topic. I'm told to ask you what's the best food in your district, or what's the unique food in your district people don't know about?
So I love my hometown of Torrance. Within 10 minutes, I can have amazing Peruvian food, Japanese food, Italian food. So there's lots of amazing places I can go, but the best place is when my wife has time to make dinner.
And you get time to sit and talk with no phones and no political conversation.
Exactly.
How diverse is Torrance? Give me a sense of your district. What is the makeup? What's the demography of that part of California?
It's a diverse, balanced city, and it prides itself on being a diverse, balanced city. It's an international destination. It's about 25 minutes from LAX. It's, by the way, hosting the Taiwan national team for the Olympics, so we're excited about that as well. and it's a beautiful hometown to be in. I encourage people to visit and spend money there.
I'm sure you do. We talked to a lot of the 535 about the nature of their committee work. So many of your colleagues swear by their committee work. It really is a driving force of why they want to be here. Right. You're vice chair, you're in leadership now at the caucus. Does that diminish the amount of time that leadership can spend getting their hands dirty in committees?
Yeah. It's not supposed to. I try not to let that happen, and it is a juggling act, but I do love my two committees, Judiciary and Foreign Affairs. And on Foreign Affairs, we get to do things like hold Secretary of State Marco Rubio responsible for his actions, and so we just had him in yesterday, and I love being on that committee.
Is there a collegiality on foreign relations that we don't see? Is it a little different in tone and tenor than, say, the Judiciary panel, which is at some times a bit feisty?
It does depend on the hearing and issue, but in general, you're correct. We do more bipartisan pieces of legislation, and we do have more bipartisan hearings.
What do you think Judiciary does in Democratic control next year? What do they do that maybe we wouldn't see under a Republican gavel?
We would make sure that this current administration stops violating the law, stops going after people that Trump happens to not like, stops weaponizing the Department of Justice.
Does it bring Pam Bondi back for questioning again?
Well, she's been fired. In the new Attorney General, whoever that may be, we will have that person in for questioning.
I asked that question because some of your colleagues were dissatisfied with some of what they've gotten from the previous leadership on the Epstein files, but it sounds like the Epstein files would be a component of what you'd want to look into.
Absolutely, unless they choose to release them under the law. So we'll see if they will choose to follow the law and do that.
Just a moment left. So what's it like to do the commute from California? That seems to be uniquely Herculean.
Yeah, it sucks. So last year I was sitting on this United plane, and the pilot came to me, hands me a card, and says, basically, congratulations, you hit a million miles. And I didn't know whether to be happy or horrified.
It's part of the assignment. Ted Lieu, thank you for giving us so much time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Much more to come, just starting on 5:30. Stand by, more to come.
You're watching 535? We'll be right back.
I work hard. My dad worked hard. That's where I got it from. What I take home is my future and my kids' future. And if I can invest in companies, they're going to reflect my principles, what I believe in. So why would those companies hire outside people to tell them to embrace principles I don't believe in? Congress must protect the financial future of Americans from the foreign-owned duopoly that answers to no one.
America's Vet Dogs is a national nonprofit empowering veterans, first responders, and active duty service members facing both visible and hidden disabilities through the placement of a highly trained service dog. However, recipients never bear the financial burden. You can be a part of making a meaningful difference in the lives of veterans and first responders in need. Learn more by visiting vetdogs.org.
This intolerable dependence on foreign oil is a clear and present danger to our nation.
We will not return to the days of gas lines.
I have repeatedly called for more energy independence for America.
I urge Congress to pass legislation that makes America more secure and less dependent on foreign energy.
After years of talking about it, we're finally poised to control our own energy future.
It's time to deliver true long-term energy independence in America.
We will have energy independence and energy dominance.
Lights on energy. Energy dominance starts now.
You're watching 535.
This is 535.
535.
You're watching 535.
535. 535.
535.
We're live on Capitol Hill, and 535 starts right now.
Welcome back to 535. I'm Leanne Caldwell with Puck News, and right now I am joined by Congresswoman Emilia Sykes of Ohio, where we are going to talk about a comprehensive list of 14 pieces of legislation that have to do with moms, maternal mortality. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Looking forward to a conversation.
Yeah. So talk to me about this. This legislation has been around for a few years, because I remember covering this several years ago. I went to Congresswoman Lauren Underwood's district, actually, and we had talked about it a little bit there. This legislation is specifically focused about the disparity in maternal mortality with Black women. So can you talk about like the big picture about how you got involved specifically, and then we'll go from there.
Absolutely. Well, we call it the Momnibus. So it's like an omnibus bill for moms, and it goes after the social determinants of health and the issues that impact women inside the hospital and outside as they're trying to bring life into this world. The United States has some of the highest rates of maternal mortality, meaning that moms die at a much higher rate here than in other industrialized countries, and that means that families are going home from the hospital with newborns but no mom to nurture them. And it's devastating for the individual families, but it's also devastating for our communities to think that we are not protecting women and mothers as they're doing one of the most precious things, is bringing life into this world. So I've been working on maternal health issues since I was a state legislator. We started the first state level Black Maternal Health Caucus when I was there to address the needs of moms and infants, because we also in this country and in the state of Ohio have really high infant mortality rates, and you don't have healthy moms without healthy babies without healthy moms. And so we wanted to get at this issue in a wholesome way, and so that's why you see the Momnibus and so many of us focusing our attention on Black mothers in particular.
Can you talk about the statistics?
Yes, so women across the country experience a much higher rate of death rates, but particularly Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die in childbirth or very shortly thereafter. And so those disparities between Black mothers and white mothers are not usually accounted for through socioeconomic status or marital status, all those protective factors, which we call them in public health. It doesn't matter. Black women with a college degree are likely to have worse birth outcomes than a white woman who graduated from high school.
Do we know why?
Yes, these are social issues. This is a lack of access to employment, education, clean air and water. All of these things make a difference. And one particular piece of information that people don't talk about often is violence is a leading cause of death for pregnant women. And pregnancy and around the time of childbirth is when you see the most homicides, usually by the romantic partner or the father of the child.
Really?
And we don't talk about it. We talk a lot about cardiovascular disease and preeclampsia and bleeding disorders, but violence is a leading cause of death for pregnant women.
Wow, I actually had no idea. So what in this legislation do you think, and it's 14 pieces of legislation, but what do you think would have the most immediate impact first?
We have to do it all. The problem is we try to do these piecemeal approaches and then we wonder why it doesn't work. The reason why these moms and infants are dying is because the system as a whole is not working for them. This is a societal failure that women don't have clean air and water, that they're not being protected from abusers. And picking one or the other will certainly change the direction, but ultimately if we really want to tackle the issue, we have to do them all. So that's why we have a Momnibus, because we want to put the package forward and saying you have to do all of these things. And many of these things people are supportive of, expanding food access and better data collection. Like, these are simple things that we can do, but we have to do them all, and we can't pick and choose or else we won't get at the issue.
You just talked about a couple. You just mentioned a couple. What are some of the other things that are in this bill?
Yes, it creates some more housing opportunities. It also gives some funding and resources to community-based programs. Community health workers, especially those who come from the community, are incredibly helpful. There are mental health services, increasing access to those, which can be exceptionally helpful because also mental health issues and suicide are leading causes as well. So we're getting and tackling at every part of a woman's life, in a family's life, to make sure that it is all working appropriately so that they can survive one of the most exciting points of their lives.
Is there an income disparity that impacts these statistics?
Shockingly, not really. This is across the spectrum. And as I mentioned, the disparity with Black women who, if they have a college degree, tend to earn more than high school graduates or those without a high school degree. But those rates for those Black women are much higher than their white counterparts. So this is an issue that impacts people across the board. I recently watched a documentary with Christy Turlington, who is a supermodel. Obviously, she had a lot of resources, but one of the reasons she had a successful pregnancy and she did not die, fortunately, was because she did have access to care. So it does impact whether or not people have care, but quite frankly, these issues and these complications run the gamut of socioeconomic backgrounds.
Yeah, Serena Williams.
Beyonce.
Oh, right, Beyonce.
Yes.
I forgot about Beyonce. Yeah, absolutely. Some of the most famous
Absolutely.
Beyonce, wealthiest women in the world.
Absolutely.
Really put a spotlight on this issue. Can you talk about, has it gotten better at all over the decades or even the past decade, or are we stagnant right now?
We're getting worse. We are not getting better. And I think part of that is the disparity between Black women and white women, as well as the fact that the intimate partner violence and domestic violence is increasing. As well as the suicide rates. So that violence portion is very significant and we need to deal with that. But also with increased awareness and training and communication, many hospitals are adjusting what they do, but it's not just what happens in the hospital, it's what's happening outside of the hospital as well. So we have to ensure people have safe homes to live in, safe communities, clean air and water, good paying jobs. There's a lot to do, but these are just the basic things that people need to live well in this country anyway. And so if we do this for Black mothers, it'll really be helpful for women and families all across the country.
Let's talk about the path forward.
Yes.
What is that path forward?
Well, first we need a functioning House of Representatives and Senate. And so when we can get that, we can start moving some of these pieces of legislation forward. But I would say this is one of those very unique opportunities where Democrats and Republicans come together, maybe through different perspectives, but promoting the health and well-being of women and infant health and is something that we've been able to find some common ground on. So right now we need to have some leadership who really is concerned about women and their babies. We hear a lot of rhetoric, but it's not always real. So this is why we continue to push this forward, because these are very, very simple ways to make sure that these numbers go down and more women are surviving childbirth.
Who are some of the Republican counterparts who are supportive of this?
The Momnibus bill as a whole, we don't have any yet, I don't believe, but we've heard a lot of women from the Bipartisan Women's Caucus who have come forward to say we want to help on issues related to women. But sometimes politics does get in the way, and unfortunately we haven't had a whole lot of support. But the first round of Momnibus was during the Trump administration. Trump signed it into law, so we know that it's possible. We just need to get folks with a little bit more political will.
And let's remind me and our viewers what Momnibus 1.0 was.
Momnibus 1.0 was mostly just identifying the problem, making people talk about it, creating maternal mortality review boards back in different states. We had one in Ohio, technical assistance, data collection, really the baseline to start the conversation and move it forward. So we've done it before. The past is prologue. I feel hopeful for it, but quite frankly, we have to do this. If we're really caring about moms and families, we have to do this.
Has the data collection since that first bill gotten better?
The challenging part is we needed disaggregated data so we could see the disparities or differences between different racial groups or geographies. With the executive orders from the Trump administration, the disaggregation is not happening, and as we heard in an HHS from the HHS secretary, he didn't believe that was necessary because it impacts everyone, but while it does impact everyone, it doesn't impact everyone the same way. So we need to see what it looks like so we can actually address the problem and not just creating Band-Aids. We need real solutions.
So this Republican leadership has not promoted or pushed this legislation. There's a chance that Democrats take control of the House after November. We'll see where that goes. But do you have any sort of commitment from your Democratic leadership, including Leader Jeffries, to prioritize this?
Well, I don't want to get ahead of Leader Jeffries and the agenda that he's going to put forth for a Democratic majority in 2027. But one thing I do know for sure is that our colleagues are committed to uplifting families, particularly women and infants, our most precious lives. And I'm confident that we will see some meaningful steps.
What about, support within the Democratic caucus? Does that support, is it made up mostly of Black women? Are there men who are supportive of this? Can you talk about the coalition that is going to be necessary or that you have now to move this?
Absolutely. Well, this bill has the overwhelming majority of members of our caucus have signed on, and I don't know the exact number, but it does include women, it does include men, and from every ideological caucus that we have to date. So the good thing is people understand, our caucus understands that if you want to make sure our families are protected, you have to make sure you support our women. And so we are all hands on deck for this issue, and many of our caucus members are mothers, they are parents. They have family members, and so they've seen and heard these stories and they resonate with them personally. So we have a large amount of members who have signed on, upwards of 200, which is really exciting. So we are all in. We just need to get our Republican colleagues to join us in protecting women.
I know you said that Democrats are mostly all in. 200 members is almost the entire caucus. We also saw the Supreme Court decision with the Voting Rights Act, which the House could lose some Black members this election or the next election. Are you worried that that has an impact on legislation like this that is meant specifically to help women, but also Black women?
It could, but here's the thing I know. The leader of our Black Maternal Health Caucus, Lauren Underwood, is from a district that would not be impacted. I am from a district that would not be impacted because we have majority white constituents. So with our leadership, it will remain, and there are other members in the same way, but we do need to make sure that people, Black people in this country, are being represented appropriately. And because of these Voting Rights Act decisions, that is at risk. These communities, especially in the South, deserve representation that understands and brings up these issues and uplifts them even in the face of an administration who tries to silence them and pretend that they're non-existent. And so I'm really concerned about the folks in the South, my family's from the South, and knowing what it means to have good representation changes lives, and that's really what our biggest concern is. But I think I know the commitment to eliminating health disparities is something that is a part of the value system of the Democratic caucus, and why I believe it'll continue to go on no matter what the Supreme Court gives us.
Is you said that this was an issue for you when you were in the Ohio legislature. How did you get involved? How did you become aware of the issue?
So I have a background in public health, and I did my master's capstone project on maternal and reproductive health issues. And particularly, we had two colleagues who started the work around infant mortality, a Democrat and a Republican, and Charlita Tavares was her name, a senator. And she said, we really need to get to this issue. Shannon Jones, her Republican counterpart, said, let me work with you. And they put together a very bipartisan group of members that I was able to take on in the House with another Republican colleague of mine. And I remember having a conversation with him and saying, we're talking about the infants, and I think that is important and we should continue, but what about the moms? And so that started the Black Maternal Health Caucus. That started the conversation around maternal health and making sure that the moms were taken care of, and it's just flourished. And so I'm so grateful that I've had bipartisan colleagues, bicameral colleagues in the House and the Senate who think this issue is important and understand that the foundation of American families lives in women and is women, and so I'm so grateful for this role and to be able to continue to uplift their stories and to protect and help them.
What about in this legislature? What about in the Senate? Is there a companion legislation over there?
There is companion legislation in the Senate. Cory Booker is leading that, and so still looking for some Republicans to help out there, but it's probably a question best suited for the senators. But we are going to continue to push it and uplift the stories and conversations of these women because they deserve to be heard, but most importantly, they deserve to live.
Great. So you have also agreed. This was a wonderful conversation. It's you know, it's something that, like I said, I have been covering off and on for several years. I had forgotten that the Momnibus 1 like the first one passed during the Trump administration, was, you know, I guess you weren't here then, were you? No, because I was going to ask, because I know Ivanka Trump was much more active in the administration then, and she had taken on some of these issues, and I was wondering if she was the reason Trump was willing to sign something like that.
I would give all the credit to the Democrats in the House caucus, Lauren Underwood, Alma Adams, who took this issue up and brought it forward and really made it focused and centered around Black women, because if we want to reduce the numbers, we have to start with the impact and where the need is the greatest. So I would give all the credit to them, as well as Speaker Pelosi, who pushed this forward and made it an issue.
Yeah. I didn't mean to take away any credit from her, but just the fact that Trump signed it was my
absolutely
my thing. So, well, thank you so much. Before we leave, I do want to ask you about 5:35 1 minutes. A little fun and
should I be afraid?
I could be tough.
Okay.
I could be tough. What is your favorite phrase uttered nowhere else but here?
This is crazy.
How many times a day do you say that?
You'd have to ask my staff, but probably more times than I would like.
Okay, I have another.
Sorry, I didn't mean to throw you off.
No, that was good. That was good. What's the most difficult part of being in Congress?
Being away from home. I love being at home.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Do you go home every week?
If I can, yes, I do.
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
How long's the flight?
45 minutes.
Oh, that's so, you have
I know, I can't complain.
Oh my gosh,
I cannot
that's
complain.
Really great. You have a direct flight, obviously.
I do, thankfully.
Yeah. And then what is the best food in your district?
Oh boy. I'm gonna have to say Swenson's. It's a old school drive-in, and it's
a
local.
Like the ice cream place?
No, it's burgers and fries and milkshakes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Swenson's. If I'm in Ohio, I'll have to
Please
stop at
do.
Swenson's.
Yes, I'll meet you there.
How's the state of Ohio looking politically for 2026?
Ohio is always a battleground. No matter who it is, people want
including
to make
your district,
including
even
my
though
district.
They're happier about your district these days.
It was not as bad as we thought it was going to be, but it still remains a frontline district where we're going to have to compete and earn every single vote. And that's essentially where all of us elected officials and candidates need to be. We need to be in a position to earn the votes, folks. They're not just going to come to us because we have great colors or good commercials. So we're speaking to anyone and everyone who's willing to listen, and even some who aren't, to say we have a plan to lower costs for you, to keep our community safe, to make sure healthcare is accessible and affordable, and let them know that their government works for them.
Great. Congresswoman Amelia Sykes, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
And this is 535. We'll be right back.
You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
So we're now at our third job together.
I love it. Wouldn't have it any other way.
You're like the house expert. So
you're like the Congress expert. I only learn from you. And now we get to do this together.
I know. We get to do 535, which is a fantastic, creative, exciting little project.
Yeah. I'm actually kind of excited to talk to leaders in a different capacity. We always ask them about, do they have the votes? What do their members think about this and that? But what is actually the policy that matters to them personally?
Love it.
He is what your show is called, The Decider.
It's Washington's hottest new show, and it has the Beltway buzzing.
Americans, they know BS when they see BS.
Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Brody Mullins.
Is this era ending and is a new era beginning?
And veteran strategist Lisa Camuso Miller.
Have you ever had to tell a client no?
Talk to the biggest and most influential players.
We wanted $1 million. He said done.
Rewriting the rules of influence.
Business is going to be on the ballot.
Congress needs to do their job.
They become lapdogs rather than watchdogs.
The people who never talk.
That's such a good question.
Talk to them.
It was kind of fun, actually.
It's Washington's only show by and for insiders.
Welcome to the
Deciders.
Watch weekly right here on 535.
A simple blood test can detect Alzheimer's years before symptoms appear.
Congress can connect Americans to early, accurate dementia diagnosis by supporting the Bipartisan Alzheimer's Screening and Prevention Act, allowing Medicare to cover blood-based Alzheimer's screening. Congress has acted to cover mammograms and other life-saving screenings. Now it can redefine Alzheimer's care, unlocking early detection and access to FDA-approved treatments when they work best. Congress, it's up to you. Paid for by the Alzheimer's Association.
There are moments that shape an organization's future. A policy shift, a crisis or investigation, a market shock. When that moment hits, the clock starts. Markets move in minutes. Regulators, employees, and customers respond instantly. Narrative helps leaders respond with pace, engage stakeholders with precision, and position brands with perspective. So when challenges emerge, you can navigate complexity and lead with clarity before the narrative is defined for you.
You're watching 535.
This is 535.
You're watching 535.
You're watching 535.
You're watching 535.
We're live from the Capitol, and 535 starts right now.
Welcome back to 535. I'm Brody Mullins here with my colleague Sue Davis. Today we're lucky to have Amos Snead, longtime friend and colleague from Capitol Hill, now CEO, founder and CEO of Ducks Group. Thanks for joining us, Amos.
Hey, glad to be with both of you, and congrats again on everything you've launched. It's
Thank
fun
you.
to watch along all your growth.
Thank you.
I do think we have to clarify up top too what kind of ducks we're talking about.
Ducks. It's Ducks. It's Latin. D-U-X. It's Latin for leader. So we work with leaders, we recruit leaders, a lot of C-suite activity. The Ducks Group is a strategic communications, public affairs firm. We specialize in highly regulated industries, so a lot of what's happening here on Capitol Hill.
So we're here today to talk about your book. We can get that on the screen. Yes, I think so. About your journey through Capitol Hill, starting
Yes.
the Young Capitol Aid. Today on this show, every day on the show, we have lots of young Capitol Aides watching who probably want to figure out how to get from where they are right now, answering the phones, dealing with constituent mail, constituent services, up to where you are now. So why don't we start with your journey, how you got from Alabama to Washington, D.C. What was your first job, and how did you move up?
Thank you. I did an internship in Washington, D.C., and I grew up in Northeast Alabama. And when I did that internship, I knew, I'm going to spend the rest of my career here. This is what I will do. And fast forward 20-something years later, I still live on Capitol Hill and raise my family here. But my first job was a staff assistant on the Energy and Commerce Committee. Now, if anyone who knows, I had the luxurious job of answering the phones, greeting guests, and then I had to make sure all the pictures and the microphones were straight on the dais before committee hearings. Now, at the time, my grandmother thought I was advising the president, but that's where I started. So I started as a staff assistant on the committee, and then I moved up to the press office, and I started answering phones there. So I spent my first 2 to 3 years on Capitol Hill just answering phones, and then later got an opportunity to go work at the time for Mr. Roy Blunt, a Republican from Missouri, who was the House Republican whip. And in most things on Capitol Hill, timing, you have to be in the right place at the right time. I got there right when digital was exploding, and Republicans, and especially Republican leadership, were leaning into that. So it was a great opportunity, and that was my Hill story.
Yeah, and I think I met you back then. I think I was with Congress Daily or with Roll Call. I don't remember. You were working for Congressman Ken Johnson. I mean, inside joke that no one will get.
3 people thought that was hilarious.
Now, Brody, I won't repeat what Ken Johnson would say about you when the phone would ring and it would show up as Brody.
So tell us about that first job at the Energy and Commerce Committee. What did you learn there?
What did I learn there? The Energy and Commerce Committee has broad jurisdiction, right? So if you're sitting up front and you're answering phones, there's 2 different ways you can be a staff assistant on Capitol Hill, right? The first way, you can pretend you're still in college and you can show up at 9:01 and your pants are a little wrinkled, or you can take it seriously and ask every person who's coming in for a meeting, who are you and what do you do? And so when you're at the Energy and Commerce Committee, I mean, there were the leaders of technology, the leaders of energy, the leaders of healthcare who were coming in for these meetings. So what an amazing opportunity, 23, 24 years old, to realize, oh my gosh, everything in this country, actually globally, at some point or another will come through Capitol Hill. So that's, I just learned there the vast scope and the vast reach of it. And also, I will say credit to the Tozan operation. They ran an incredible communication shop. So it was just great to see that work and legislation start in the committee and end up passed on the House floor in the effort that went behind that.
Part of what I think is interesting about your career is you came in through 2 lanes. You did committee work, policy focused work, and you also had this experience in leadership, which is much more strategic, communications. Do you think today, is those still the main two paths on Capitol Hill? Do you want to be a policy person, or do you want to be a comms person, or can you do both?
I think there's about 3 different paths you could do on Capitol Hill right now. Do you want to go the scheduling route? Do you want to go the policy route, or do you want to go the communications route? And it's kind of tough to move from each of those once you start, because if you're a communicator, policy staff looks at you a little different.
What do you know?
Yeah, or if you're the legislative director, like, why are you talking to the journalist? So I think those are the paths you go on. Now, what you see now is a lot of overlap. Once you get to the chief of staff, right? If it's a chief of staff who came from the campaign, came from the communication side, you start to see a lot of that mixed together. But in other offices and other operations, it's very siloed between policy, communications, and then the chief of staff or the campaign side.
I also want to know, too, your book is called Climbing the Hill, but we should be clear, it came out in 2018.
It did,
right?
Yes.
And what was the impetus for this book? And I'd love you to talk a little bit about your co-author.
Oh, thank you very much. So my co-author is Jamie Harrison, and he is a Democrat from South Carolina, and he ran the floor for Jim Clyburn when he was the House Democratic Whip in the House. So I knew Jamie because I was working for Mr. Blunt on the Republican side, and he was working for Mr. Clyburn on the Democratic side. We just knew of each other. After we left the Hill, we had a couple opportunities to work together, and I invited him to speak to a young group of low-income students from South Carolina. And Jamie moved them. They were moved. I saw young people's eyes open up after what he talked about. And so we got coffee a couple weeks after that, and Jamie asked me, he said, do you give advice to young people looking for jobs on the Hill? And I was like, yeah, probably 2 to 3 to 4 coffees a week. And he was like, I do that too. What do you tell him? He told me what he shares. I shared what I shared, and he said, we should write this in a book. Because there's not a guide at the time we couldn't find that was a practitioner's guide to how do you get a job on the Hill? How do you make this a career? Where do you go? How do you move up? And so we spent a lot of time together writing this book. Now I'll say we first started writing it 2015, 2016.
Yeah.
We wrote it, we shopped it around, and we were told no across the board. So just for anyone out there watching, don't give up, because we wrote it, we had it done, and then in 2017, 2018, we got a deal and we published it. The reason we're talking about it now today, a lot of colleges and universities are using it for their classrooms, right? It's part of their syllabus, and so we will get calls to come in and talk to the group, and man, I feel good about this country, I feel good about democracy just from who we're meeting with in some of these classrooms.
So to the young people watching, what is the #1 thing they should be doing? The person who's just gotten their first job on the Hill, what's your major takeaway?
I'm going to give you 2. I know you said 1. People are watching, right? People are watching. Your chief of staff's watching, but also the interns watching it. Your reputation becomes what you trade. It becomes your currency in this town. So people are watching. The other thing I would do is take time and reach out, right? A lot of people on the Hill, you get access, right? Like you can take people on tours, you can get invitations to things, take people with you. There's always a younger person who's moving to Washington that just came here and all they knew how to do was just get to Capitol Hill. Those are the people that you can help. And I had some advice in my early 20s. They said, be careful who you're hanging out with, because this crowd's going to run the city in 10 years and they'll run the country in 20. And I'm like, no, you don't know the people I'm hanging out with. We're wasting too much time in Georgetown and Capitol Lounge on the Hill. And sure enough, in 10 years, you start to see like, oh, he ran for office, and oh, she's a TV anchor and has her own show. And then in 20 years, you start to see, oh, that staff assistant is a CEO, or that former intern is now a member of Congress who is a ranking member in the House. So these are all true stories that happen.
And that's true of Jamie Harrison.
It's true of Jamie. I mean, we were on our book tour, and Jamie said, I think I'm going to run for Senate. I was like, okay, sure. And then he showed me a campaign video, and then he started raising a lot of money. So he left our book tour, Jamie, to go run for Senate in South Carolina. And following that run, he became the chairman of the Democratic National Committee. So he used the book to launch his career. But what we're doing now is we're going to do a refresh of his experience working at the DNC and what Capitol Hill taught him and what we can bring to a next edition of this book. Probably this spring or fall, that's what we're working on the timing.
So we also talk to young people all the time, obviously more in journalism. And combining your 2 answers, I mean, what I talk about is relationships.
Sure.
The value of those, the value of those relationships, that the people who you meet now will be important down the road. But also, go out and meet new people.
Yes.
Republicans, Democrats, for us, lobbyists, trade associations, members of Congress, chiefs of staff, because they're all going to move up. And if you meet one new person a week, if you can find 1 hour to have a breakfast, lunch, coffee, drinks, everyone can find 1 hour and meet one new person a week. In a year, that's 50 people. In 2 years, that's 100 people. And all of a sudden, you're building your network. And you don't need to be established to do that. You can do that at 22.
Yeah.
Yes.
And those are the people who 20 years later are members of Congress.
Yes.
Or they're running a newspaper, or they're running a trade association, or they're running Ducks, right?
The advice I would give to a young person now is you don't have to do this all on your own. Find a partner in crime, find 2 partners in crime, and say you invite 3 people, you invite 4, and we're just going to have dinner tomorrow night, right? Or give some people. If you start convening, so what I would like to do, I would mix together downtown staff, congressional staff, Republicans, Democrats, members of the media, right? And we would put them all together, and it worked. And so we started doing this 20, 15 years ago. I'm still doing it today professionally. So we will have clients who will come to us and say, we really need to have this conversation with this group of people, some elected officials, some journalists. Could you convene that? And so what we learned on Capitol Hill, getting softball teams together and congressional baseball parties together, actually works 15, 20 years later in the professional world.
One of the things I think is so interesting about the Hill is there's almost 2 ecosystems, right?
Okay.
There's lawmakers,
yes,
and I think particularly in the modern political moment, there's this perception that it's very contentious, it's very polarizing. But then there's the staff ecosystem, and in so many ways, staff has always been much more collegial, much more bipartisan, because as any good staff would tell you, that's where a lot of the work gets done up here. And I wonder if you still, in the experience of being up here and talking to staffers, is that still true? And I think particularly in the committees like Appropriations, Armed Services, Senate Finance, the chairman and ranker might not get along, but those staff directors and those lawyers, they all know how to get around a table and write a piece of legislation.
I can only speak from experience, and right now we're working with a group, the Gulf South Business Roundtable, that's trying to recruit just global investment, industrial investment to the Gulf South. These 5 states have come together and these companies have come together. And now there's a caucus on Capitol Hill. And so these are offices, Republican, Democrat, who are beating each other to death in the press. And their staff are working together because they know this is good for the region. They know this is good for their state and the state next to them. And so that still exists. It's not talked about. It's not in the media coverage a lot just because it serves no purpose for that office, right? When I was on Capitol Hill, it was okay to reach across the aisle and have a meeting. Now it could get you primary. But it still exists on a staff level. And that was from 2 weeks ago.
I'm also curious, and this is going to make me sound like a boomer because I don't know what the kids are doing these days, but Brody and I both grew up as young reporters, I would almost say when it was still an analog world. I remember getting a BlackBerry. I remember all of these innovations. The internet was not what it was today. And we had a lot more forward, front-facing relationships and communications with staffers. I mean, you met in person all the time. You went out to dinner a lot. And I don't know, the modern world, 1, doesn't require it, but 2, I don't know if there is still that level of in-person socialization. I mean, not with staff amongst themselves, but staff and, say, reporters, or staff and advocates, or any of the people that they might have to interact with in their day-to-day jobs.
I think it's always changing. When I was a young staffer 22, 23 years ago, many, many years ago, the chief counsel would talk about it didn't used to be like this, right? They used to go and drink after their spouses were friends and they were part. So when I was coming up, they said it never used to be like this. It's so partisan now. And now I'm the boomer saying it used to be a lot nicer.
Yeah.
But I do think a lot of that's fallen off. When I talk with young journalists and I talk with young communications staff, and I ask them how often are you grabbing coffee, how often are you doing drinks, I don't think it happens nearly as much as it used to. And I would argue I don't think it happens as much as it should. If you're a sports fan and you watch the Yankees and the Red Sox, right? They don't like each other. The fans don't like each other. The owners don't like each other. But if you see the superstar get walked to first base, the first baseman puts his glove up and they have a talk, right? So the superstars can reach across the aisle. The superstars can have that conversation. Meanwhile, everything else may just be noise. That's how we've always looked at it. It takes some guts to go out there and do that, but that's why you're batting fourth.
Amos,
Yes.
you wrote the book with Jamie Harrison. Your son Harrison just got into Gonzaga High, so I want to give him a shout. I'm wearing my purple for him
Thank you
today.
very much, Brody.
We have about a minute to go. Tell us about your work with the National Press Foundation.
Absolutely. I've been involved with the Press Foundation for over a decade. They have an annual dinner that raises a lot of money that trains young journalists. So they run programs throughout the year that's just training young journalists, and they're hearing from veterans who've been here 5, 10, 15 years. I think the National Press Foundation is more important today as newsrooms continue to shrink, right? So whereas when you two were coming up, there were people you could talk to who've done this 10, 15 years. That doesn't exist in some newsrooms now. So that's where organizations like the Press Foundation really play a key role.
And you're involved with their annual fundraising?
I'm involved with I co-chaired their annual dinner. It's in February. We'd love to have all of your viewers and listeners join us, and we'll make sure that we send you information on it.
Amos, thanks for joining us. So your book, Climbing the Hill with Jamie Harrison, is coming out again soon. Thanks for joining us. Amos Sneed from Ducks, Sue Davis, Brody Mullins on 535. Thanks for joining us.
I'm getting coffee soon.
You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Rome. I've played many roles on TV and film, but today I want to speak to you as myself about a cause that's very dear to my heart. The Cancer Prevention and Treatment Fund provides free help to those who have cancer and those who wish to prevent it. They've also worked tirelessly on banning cancer-causing chemicals in our homes and neighborhoods. I want to thank them as a mom for protecting our families. Please donate today at the Cancer Prevention and Treatment Fund at stopcancerfund.com.
National Association of Realtors Advocacy, working to expand access to housing and defend property rights so that more Americans can build generational wealth and prosperity through home ownership, a critical voice in nearly 1/5 of the U.S. economy, supporting 2 jobs for every single-family home sold, and generating more than $760 billion of property tax revenue for state and local governments each year. Realtors are members of the National Association of Realtors.
In Afghanistan, the IED actually penetrated the vehicle between my legs, but it was a miracle that we all survived in the vehicle.
When I began the process to separate from the military, it was during COVID. And with the issues back home, we just knew we got to come back home and take care of the family. So we had to go stay at our mom's house. And there's already 3 people living there, and 5 of us, or 8 people. How many bedroom? Like a 2-bedroom. Like a 2-bedroom house. We were desperate.
So then when we transitioned to Texas, it was very much so like, what are we gonna do now?
When I came home, I needed a new roof due to a storm, and I was about to lose homeowners insurance as well. I applied for Operation Homefront Critical Financial Assistance Program. They've really been a blessing.
I'm in the Permanent Homes for Veterans program. They built a house for me, and it's amazing.
We got the call, this is your house, and the kids and I took off just to go sit in the driveway and cry. It's life-changing. It took us from a hopeless situation, and now we're homeowners. We have a savings account.
The best way to describe Operation Homefront is that it's like a family because they're always there for you.
I would say you guys are angels behind closed doors.
Operation Homefront has impacted my family in a way that's probably going to be passed down through my family's history. It's definitely going to be a story that's going to be told for generations.
Back on 535, joined by Johnny Olszewski, first-term Democrat, Maryland's beautiful Baltimore County, Carroll County, and Baltimore City District. Right. You've been working on a number of things, but what's noted so much over the past few weeks is your effort on judicial term limits, which maybe has a unique bipartisan coalition that could get behind it, because this is something that lasts well beyond any one administration. What does this ROBE Act do?
That's right. Straightforward constitutional amendment, 18-year term limits applied retroactively. As you pointed out, is something that's supported by 75% of Republicans, Democrats, and independents. This cuts across political ideology, and so I'm looking forward to working with my colleagues to see if we can get this really important structural reform done.
There have been different variants on judicial term limits proposed before. Explain the differences in the ROBE Act. Is it just Supreme Court? Is it district and appeals courts too?
This is just the Supreme Court, and I think, when you think about the fact that Supreme Court justices are the final word on some of the most important and consequential decisions facing Americans today, that it makes sense that we're focused there. We've got 9 justices, a life tenure. Alexander Hamilton called this the least dangerous branch in the Federalist Papers. And it was a court that many people actually didn't want to sign up for. People actually turned down the appointment. They didn't see it as prestigious enough. And now we're seeing decisions that are some of the most consequential and impactful decisions that impact our lives as Americans. They're becoming increasingly partisan along political lines, even though justices aren't supposed to be. And in this context of overturning decades of precedents on reproductive rights, voting rights, affirmative action, and with this context of really big ethical questions about the court as well, I think it's time that we have the reform and hold this court accountable.
How do you approach a Republican on this without that Republican thinking, hey, you're just trying to hamstring a 6-3 court that has been doing a lot of things we like?
Well, the truth of the matter is it's why we do it as a constitutional amendment, so it will be in perpetuity and that there will be this consistent turnover. And I also am honest with Republicans. I said, look, if we were to pass this right now, there'd be 3 justices that would be gone. And yes, there'd be people like John Roberts and Clarence Thomas, but guess who'd get to make those appointments? It'd be Donald Trump. And so while I would probably be concerned about who those individuals might be, it would be through the advice and consent of the Senate, and I think it would sort of have that turnover that our framers envisioned. I mean, the average tenure of a Supreme Court justice was about 17 years until the 1970s. Now we're pushing 30 years. And so I think that as I talk to my Republican colleagues, I really appeal to, a lot of them are traditionalists, a lot of them are constitutionalists, and so really trying to get at this sense of asserting Congress's authority and having those reforms that I think the American people, including their constituents, overwhelmingly support.
What gives you an indication there's a public support for this broadly? With a constitutional amendment, you would need public support being broad.
Yeah, poll after poll, before Republicans were in the majority, now this has been an idea that has been overwhelmingly supported by Americans. And while I personally would support any effort in the meantime, whether it's a law change or ethics reform, I do think a constitutional amendment is much more enduring and really gets at both ensuring that a future Congress doesn't undo that law, but also a constitutional amendment for me is important because it says that justices then can't review the law. Because I think there's a world in which if we were to pass term limits through legislation, this same Supreme Court might say that is unconstitutional, and an ironic twist of judicial review. So I'm for any kind of reform, ethics, term limits that actually moves the ball forward, but I do think a constitutional amendment is the best way to get it done.
Do you think there's less support or less of a need to do this at the district courts, the appeals courts that handle so much of actual American jurisprudence?
Yeah, I mean, I do. I think that the Supreme Court level is ultimately the most important place to have this reform because they are the ones reviewing those decisions. You think about the Alabama case that recently came up. You had 2 Trump-appointed justices and another Republican-appointed justice. So all 3 Republican-appointed justices that said, yes, there was racial discrimination, and then the Supreme Court overturned that map. And so I do think that ultimately what matters most is having that turnover and that predictability, not having the political gamesmanship of what happened between Merrick Garland, who was 9 months out from an appointment, versus Amy Coney Barrett, who was in the midst of early voting, and to have Mitch McConnell play those political games with Supreme Court justices, this would remove, I think, a lot of that. And I hope this is something that Republicans and Democrats alike can get behind.
Your background comes as a county executive in Baltimore County, handling very retail, local issues. What brought you to handle a federal judiciary constitutional amendment in your first year here?
You know what's interesting is, and I do think if we had more local mayors and county executives in Congress, we would get a lot more done. But that's one piece of it is, Americans, there are so many issues where 70 to 80% of Americans support common sense reforms, whether it's the Roe Act or if it's banning stock trade by members of Congress. And I think we should get that done. So it's that approach as a county executive. But interestingly enough, it's my time as a classroom teacher. I taught high school students American government before getting into politics at all. That really is motivating this and understanding that we have a responsibility as keepers of this really sacred inheritance of our democratic system to be moving forward and modernizing it so that we are really advancing the interests of what our founders gave us many years ago, 250 years ago.
Let's talk about the issue of teachers. You have a background as a government teacher, as somebody who did actual civics in the classroom, and you have a proposal to better mobilize federal resources to help teacher mental well-being. Explain that.
Yeah, and I'm proud to be co-leading this with Shontel Brown, and I want to thank her for her efforts. This is really about the mental health and well-being of teachers. We know that, especially post-COVID, that teachers have taken on so much more as students have brought the challenges of the community into the classroom. And if teachers are going to serve students most effectively, we have to make sure that they're okay too. And so I think one of the best things we can do as members of Congress is really provide those wraparound services for all of our public servants. But given how much time and how much influence our teachers have on our students, making sure that they are okay and they have that mental health and wellness support is so critical. So I was happy to put that in.
What kind of unique or distinctive wraparound services a teacher need? versus other public servants? What's the type of thing we're not thinking of that would really serve somebody who's doing 180 days a year in the classroom?
Well, think about, here's a great example. We've got summer coming up. A lot of teachers have children. I've got a 10-year-old, so if I were still teaching, I'd have this problem too. If we're asking them to provide summer tutoring or to do summer school for our students, they then have to make sure that they have childcare taken care of for their kids. And so as we think about firefighters and teachers and police officers and other public servants, like how are we looking out for their mental health? How are we considering the fact that we're asking them to not spend time potentially with their children to continue working through the summer? So I think those kinds of nuanced approaches really make a big difference for those who are serving us.
With kids in public schools and with the saturation of devices, I'm noticing Congress keeps stalling out on kids' online safety proposals. You've gotten this taste of these in your first term. Why can't they get to a finish line on things that parents seem to agree on?
I don't know is the honest answer, because I have the same frustration not just about common sense issues like that and the influence, especially you think about the mental health of young girls with the social media and some of these platforms. But, Congress can't seem to do much of anything these days. And this has been the least productive Congress in a long time. And so whether it's on those issues or, again, those structural issues of how we conduct ourselves and stock trading or common sense gun safety, like things like background checks or reproductive rights, there are a lot of places where I think that you'd see some of these healthcare votes, the ACA tax credits, where there is overwhelming support from the American people. I think if we were to take a vote, you'd have strong bipartisan majorities on a lot of these issues, and we're just simply not acting. And so one of the things I'm trying to figure out why it's not working so well as a freshman and hoping to change, quite frankly.
And it's part of this particular rhythm in this Congress to stall out on things that do have 70-80% approval.
Yeah.
Work your way through that. The head of the American Federation of Teachers, Randi Weingarten, has started this initiative about maybe we move more devices out of more elementary classrooms and maybe we find a way to better navigate AI and devices in the high school classrooms with which you're accustomed.
Sure.
As a former teacher, what do you think could or should be done on that?
I'm a big supporter of back to basics and literacy. We know that children who are reading by the 3rd grade level do better in life, they do better in school. One of the first things I did as Baltimore County Executive was we actually had every student starting in kindergarten was on a laptop. And all day, every day, they were on a device. And so we actually phased out the use of technology at the earliest years. I actually support that idea nationally to say, let's make sure that we're giving you the basics before we introduce this new technology and we want our children to be technologically literate and to be able to navigate the society, but if you don't have the foundational tools, I think we're really missing an opportunity. So as a member, I'm supportive of that and hope that we can see some progress there.
Have you found the other teachers here in the House or on the Senate side? There's a group of you.
There's a few of us. We probably need to make sure that we're doing like an educators caucus, just like we should do a mayor's and county executive caucus. That they seem to be easier to find than the other educators. But I know that we're here, and we probably need to raise our voices together because I think there's probably nothing more important that we can do than educate our children here.
You made a push, a apparently successful push on attainable housing in your first term. What did you propose and where did it go?
So I worked with Representative Sam Liccardo on this. This is housing legislation that will help us go in to underutilize commercial spaces and provide the resources to turn that into housing. And so again, I think sort of building on the work that both of us did as local leaders coming to Congress to say there are real opportunities to leverage and harness the vast resources of the federal government to get stuff done. And so really was pleased to work with him and the Financial Services Committee to get that piece of legislation included into the housing bill that's now back over in the Senate and hopefully will be formally adopted and signed into law.
Is that one of those things, one of those silver bullet things where you can easily extend an olive branch over and get a conversation going?
For sure.
Feels like it is.
For sure. And you mentioned why things aren't happening. I do think that the president has an outside influence on this Republican majority, and I think folks are hesitant to move forward, not knowing where the president might be on any particular issue. So I think that's certainly one dynamic that's become pretty evident. to me, but also just building the relationships. I mean, housing and other issues. I have another constitutional amendment on pardon integrity that I'm working with Don Bacon on, finding those opportunities to work together and just build the relationships. I mean, Jeff Hurd has become a colleague whom I trust and respect. We've started doing freshman and bipartisan mixers just so that we spend time. And so the first conversation we have across the aisle isn't criticizing a vote necessarily or pushing an agenda, but really just being able to say, how was your wife? How was your kids? What did you do this weekend? And I feel like, unfortunately, Capitol Hill is a place where we're intentionally divided, which makes it a lot harder to have those bipartisan initiatives together.
It seems like there's some parallels between the judicial term limits proposal you're coming up with and pardon integrity with Mr. Bacon of Omaha.
Yeah.
Tell us what that proposal does and where you're going with it.
Yeah, I think the through line for me is really about how do we, again, make our systems modern and adaptable to what we're seeing on the ground. The Pardon Integrity Act would go after what's meant to be a tool of justice and mercy, the pardon, but has been abused not just by this president, I think especially so by President Trump, but throughout administrations, to say that Congress has a role to review and potentially overturn the most egregious of pardons. And so it is a constitutional amendment again that would create a petition and review process where 20 members of the House and 5 members of the Senate would be able to petition for a vote. It would initiate an automatic review and vote, but it would require 2/3 supermajorities of both houses, an intentionally high bar to overturn those. And I think just having some oversight hopefully would make presidents think twice before issuing some of these really terrible pardons that we've seen.
The ones that cut through and are transcendently unpopular, you think, under the proposal, you could get to that 2/3 supermajority.
Yeah, you think about the pardon of the drug kingpin. You think about the pardon of the crypto magnate who gave millions of dollars to the president's re-election and family. I think for me, the most telling indication that there's a problem is that there's a pardon shopping industry where people are paying upwards of $1 million to high-priced lawyers who are connected to the administration to get a pardon for themselves or their family members. I think most Americans would say that that's absolutely wrong. I don't have access to that. And I think, again, it just shows that the absolute need for some structural reforms in how we govern our country.
In our time left, we talked about some of the common sense things that get jammed up by the crisis of the moment.
Yeah.
What are your constituents telling you about what seems to be the crisis of the week here, the anti-weaponization fund of taxpayer money through the White House?
I hear from my constituents clearly and consistently that cost and corruption are the two biggest issues. That we have a president who promised to lower costs on day one, and this Congress has done effectively nothing to lower costs. In fact, we've done the opposite through the war and tariffs, so gas, groceries, and all kinds of other things are through the roof. And then we also know that corruption has a cost. And so people see, and I think Republicans, especially in the Senate, are finally saying enough, fortunately, that we can't just start doling out billions of taxpayer dollars for political grievances. And so it's my hope that this is the straw that breaks the camel's back in terms of saying we'll start standing up to these corrupt practices. When the president is investing in a stock and then putting the stock ticker on his social media and promoting it, when he is buying stock and then reversing chip controls and allowing advanced chips to be sold to countries that benefit and companies that benefit, people are right to be concerned about that. So the costs and corruption are very real, and that's what my folks back home want us to be fighting for and focused on.
Let me ask you about your district. Baltimore County is within range of here, some days more accessible than
others. That's right.
What's the best food? What's the best place to go eat in your district?
Well, out of district, just outside is Coco's Pub, best crab cake in the world.
You're sneaking onto somebody else's territory to say that.
Congressman Mfume will claim that happily, I'm sure. But if you want steamed crabs, go to Bill's Seafood on Bel Air Road. Just amazing seasoning, big, thick, full crabs, and I recommend some steamed crabs from Bill's Seafood.
Are you good at doing that? My life in Maryland, I'm still cutting up my hands.
You can't represent Baltimore and not have some skill at cracking steamed crab. So come on up, we'll have you out for some.
Tell me about your committee work. What have you found singularly different about the committees you're on, or important about the committees you're on?
Foreign affairs, I've learned so much, and obviously with all of the wars that are happening, I've been very active in that work, trying to make sure that American interests are actually being served. I would say that has been rewarding but also challenging with this administration.
You got a ton of military in your district.
Yeah, a lot of federal workers, a lot of military, and then also serving on the Small Business Committee this Congress with Roger Williams. And we've found baseball to be actually the great uniter. He's the coach of the Republicans. I play for the Democrats. Looking forward to the game next week. But we've actually found a way to put together 3 separate bills and resolutions where Roger, Representative Williams, and I have co-led that effort, and actually have really enjoyed small business being a place where we still find a lot of places for bipartisanship and bipartisan legislation.
Does that committee have a different rhythm to it, partisan rhythm to it?
Yeah, I mean, we still have the occasional partisan bill, but I would say by and large, we find ways to produce legislation that is bipartisan and that typically has overwhelming bipartisan support coming out. I would love to see more of that throughout Congress, but I will take what I can get given the circumstances.
Just a minute left. You came in here as an executive, a county executive, pretty populous, pretty well-funded county. Isn't it a different muscle to be a legislator?
Very.
Than an administrator?
Very different.
Is that a learning curve?
Well, no. So I served in the state legislature after I was a teacher, before I became county executive. So it's actually been fun to marry the work that I did in our state legislature to be a local executive and bring it here. I would say that we don't get as much done, but I recognize that the importance of this role and what the decisions we make, how just impactful they are, is not lost on me. And so I'm just grateful for the opportunity, learning a lot, growing a lot, challenging myself, but also challenging my colleagues so that we can make a difference for the American people.
From the House Small Business and Foreign Affairs Committees, first-term Democrat Johnny Olszewski. Johnny, thank you.
Thank you.
You're watching 535. I'm Scott McFarland. Back in a moment.
You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
There are moments that shape an organization's future. A policy shift, a crisis or investigation, a market shock. When that moment hits, the clock starts. Markets move in minutes. Regulators, employees, and customers respond instantly. Narrative helps leaders respond with pace, engage stakeholders with precision, and position brands with perspective. So when challenges emerge, you can navigate complexity and lead with clarity before the narrative is defined for you.
I work hard. My dad worked hard. That's where I got it from. What I take home is my future and my kids' future. And if I can invest in companies, they're going to reflect my principles, what I believe in. So why would those companies hire outside people to tell them to embrace principles I don't believe in? Congress must protect the financial future of Americans from the foreign-owned duopoly that answers to no one.
Congressman Moliner, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Appreciate you having me.
Can you explain to people where your district is and what kind of district it is? What do they grow in your district? And is that a big job industry in your district? Talk to me about this bill you have. It's called the Farms Act. What exactly is the problem you're trying to solve with it? Is this something that the administration could address on their own, or does it need to require Congress to pass a law to really fix it? Is this bipartisan at all? Do you have Democratic support? So what's the brass tacks here? Who's your counterpart in the Senate, and what is the path forward you see for this legislation?
Oh my gosh. You know, let me think about that.
I enlisted as a medic to be there to help my patients, and after an injury, I found myself as a patient. I experienced post-traumatic seizures. Depression is a big one that comes along with it, PTSD. So I pursued my PhD in neuroscience and regenerative medicine. The coalition has helped fund my academic pursuits. They genuinely care about helping the vet in whatever way that they can. Through supporting the coalition, you're supporting some of the veterans that have the biggest needs.
Visit SaluteHeroes.org to learn more.
We are Lions International, one association of global volunteers, one foundation for humanitarian grants, shaping the future, one act of kindness at a time. We are on a mission to improve health and well-being, to strengthen communities, to serve a world in need. We are Lions International.
To learn more, visit lionsclubs.org.
Welcome back to 535, everybody. Sue Davis here, a contributor for 535. This is Paul Kane. I'm a congressional correspondent for Notice, and we are joined by Gabe Fleischer, the author of Wake Up to Politics, a Substack newsletter that's a must-read. And he has this feature, usually comes out on Friday mornings when Congress is in session. What did Congress actually do this week? He's back again for another presentation of this. Tell us, what did Congress actually do this week?
So it's been a bit of a busy week up here, a little bit short week, but busy week up here. The biggest thing, obviously right now we have going on a vote-a-rama in the Senate as they're trying to advance the reconciliation bill, so that's obviously been taking up most of the Senate's time. Over on the House side, there was two interesting votes yesterday. One on the War Powers Resolution. Obviously, we've seen several of these go up. We saw one advance in the Senate a few weeks ago, and then now for the first time we saw one kind of cross the threshold in the House. As a result of several Republican defections. I think Trump bashed them this morning as bad Republicans. But we saw that kind of the first time a War Powers Resolution to curb the war in Iran passed the House, and then also a vote yesterday to formally discharge, we talked about a few weeks ago, the vote on the bill to sanction Russia and to add aid to Ukraine that we've seen, as we talked about, kind of record number of discharge petitions, and this was the formal vote to discharge it onto the House floor. We saw, I believe, 6 Republicans, then Kevin Kiley defect on that to kind of set up a formal vote on that.
You know what was amazing about the vote, the Ukraine vote? This has happened a few times in recent weeks. There were the exact same number of Democrats and Republicans. If you count Kiley as a Republican as in their caucus, it was, in terms of the total number of voting people, not how they voted yes or no, but just the total number of votes, it was an actual tie. It was like that a couple weeks ago on the War Power, with the vote before what was supposed to be the War Powers Act. It was 210-210. Yesterday it was 211-211. It's just wild to see these majorities trying to get anything done when they've got no margin for error.
Yeah, it is fascinating to me too to just see how many discharge petitions move now. It just speaks to the way that this Congress functions unlike any other. I'm curious too to ask your thoughts about reconciliation, because it seems like they've gotten over these two big hurdles of getting stuff out of the bill that was really unpopular. Vote-a-rama's never easy. But I guess maybe for both of you, does it feel like reconciliation is a little bit more on a glide path than it was potentially 2-3 weeks ago?
Maybe. I was just in the Senate chamber just before this. Didn't feel like a glide path, I'll tell you. It certainly felt like they're going to work something out, but we're seeing, for a long time there was just this huge huddle of Collins, Murkowski, Cassidy, Sullivan, Husted, and then Thune and Barrasso. And I will say, they did not seem happy with each other. And we saw Cassidy and Thune having some animated conversations. So it seems like they're going to iron out some compromise on some Cassidy amendment on the weaponization fund. But at least I haven't been able to check my phone since we've been on here, but they've been holding this first vote open for 2 hours, which doesn't bode so well for
That's nothing in the
Senate
Senate
I suppose.
But this is like the new normal. It used to be when you lined up reconciliation, you didn't move until you knew exactly where all the votes were, and you just banged through. But now it's happened under Schumer. He had like a 12-hour vote in 2021 because they didn't quite have Joe Manchin locked down. And eventually they got there and they passed that initial vote, and then it took them another 10 hours or something after that. Last summer, I think there were multiple 8 to 10 hour votes in the Senate. There certainly was on the House side as well. What is going on? Why can't these guys lock this down?
And it was fascinating to watch them literally working out on the floor right in front of us. And at one point, Bill Cassidy kind of handed an amendment to Elizabeth McDonough, the parliamentarian. Looked like she was looking over, maybe deciding what kind of threshold it would be at. And all the reporters kind of leaned over, and he literally said, "Turn around," and pointed out, kind of waved to all of us, and had her turn around and see how everyone was just watching. The machinations. There's not only did they not have it settled before they started the vote, but they're not even going back to their offices. They were literally working out kind of in real time. And so we'll see what.
It also seems to me too, though, that maybe glide path is not the right word, but when you consider where we are, particularly in an election year, and the chances of things passing or not passing, reconciliation is also the best leverage point for any senator who has something they want to get done or something to campaign on. And for a lot of senators, their last attempt at maybe a little bit of legacy from the Cornyn's, the Cassidys, the Tillises, like they tend to want to maybe get something done before they leave, and that seems to lend itself more towards action than inaction in an election year.
It was ironic to see on the floor Kyrsten Sinema was also there today, and she was kind of walking around hugging people, and it was kind of reminding me, like, there's basically, when you talk about that huddle that I was describing, like there's kind of like 4 or 5 or 6 kind of Kyrsten Sinemas right now, like they all have the power to kind of sway, you know, the vote no matter what they, you know, however they go.
They never leave.
Yeah, they never do leave. Have any Republicans actually voted no?
Susan Collins has voted yes on Schumer's motion to send it back to committee.
Okay. Yeah, this is, okay, it's that parliamentary thing where,
motion to recommit.
Okay. So that's the only Republican vote, but there are still 3 others
At least as of when I
hanging
walked out
there,
here.
Okay. All right, the House War Powers stuff. Explain it from a standpoint of how significant it is from a symbolic rebuke versus what does it actually do?
Well, it's kind of complicated because the War Powers Resolution, you know, is itself somewhat complicated, and then there's the Supreme Court decision, INS v. Chadha, that kind of invalidated parts of it, or at least made it a little more complicated. So the measure that people might recall a few weeks ago that advanced in the Senate was a joint resolution that would need to get both chambers to sign on and then the president to sign. What the House voting yesterday was a concurrent resolution that doesn't go to the president's desk, but under INS v. Chadha has been essentially invalidated as a way for actual policy to be made. So really, if the war were actually to be stopped, it would need to be a joint resolution. The problem being that only concurrent resolutions are privileged in the House. So probably the only way that the war could actually be stopped, or really that anything could get to the president's desk, is the joint resolution that's advanced in the Senate, needs to pass there, probably need a discharge petition in the House, would need to pass there, then it goes to the president's desk. Of course, he can still veto it, so it's just like symbolic on symbolic on symbolic. That's the clearest way to get at least something on the president's desk. Of course, then would still need 2/3 to override. The point being, this is not a vote that is actually going to change, you know, our foreign policy in Iran, but obviously is still a symbolic rejection. At this point, we have majorities of both chambers of Congress on record saying that the war should end. Obviously, that's majorities of the branch of government that theoretically is supposed to be declaring war, kind of on record saying they don't want this war, but because of all these different procedural reasons and the presidential veto power, unclear if that'll actually be able to work.
Can you talk about the Republicans who voted for it? Who were they? What was sort of the motivations there?
Yeah, I mean, these are Republicans we've seen kind of, obviously Thomas Massie, you know, for a long time has been voting against these. We saw, you know, Tom Barrett in Michigan has added, Warren Davidson in North Carolina. So we've seen kind of a growing kind of, you know, contingent, I think, especially with the 60-day threshold. And also, you know, on the Democratic side, Jared Golden, I believe this was his first time voting for one. And he kind of made the point that, you know, this was the first time that a full vote had come on this since the 60-day mark had passed, which I think has been very important to a lot of those Republicans to see that kind of, you know, that threshold was written into the War Powers Resolution. To see that deadline cross, I think, has kind of moved, at least, you know, it's only a handful, but all it takes is a handful, to your point.
And does this apply because there is not an actual, what we call AUMF, an authorization of force, a war resolution? Is that, because I don't understand, like, you go back 20 years ago, Democrats were trying to do everything they could to stop the Iraq war, but there was an actual AUMF in that case. Is that the idea that they were governed by that, and so war powers didn't
theoretically
apply?
The War Powers Resolution says anytime the armed forces are engaged in hostilities, that, like, it sets that kind of, you know, 60-day clock. The president at the beginning has to report to Congress that armed forces are engaged in hostilities, and theoretically, you know, after 60 days there should be, yes, some sort of authorization or war declaration. Doesn't matter if there was one at the beginning or not. You know, theoretically, armed forces should not be engaged in hostilities this long without any word from Congress. Of course, the, you know, quirk being we're in a ceasefire now, which the president has then formally notified Congress that the hostilities have ceased. Obviously, there's never been really any kind of legal interpretation or, you know, legal ruling. You know, does a ceasefire pause the 60-day clock? Does it keep running? If the ceasefire ends, would the president then have to report that hostilities have restarted? You know, we're really in uncharted territory because usually by this point there would be an AUMF or a war declaration or kind of a cessation of hostilities, which maybe we've had, maybe we haven't. You know, it's kind of up in the air.
Although I think this is one of those issues too where Congress could be more muscular if they wanted to. There's an element where members like to take a public position on the issue, a political position, But I'm not sure members of Congress actually want more of this power. I think that they historically, particularly since 9/11, have been quite comfortable with whoever the president is making these kind of military judgments, and sometimes they like to tisk, but they're not really going, first executive branch power fight here. It's a little bit of like, we're not happy, but we're not really going to try to stop you that hard,
No, it's certainly right, and this has been a bipartisan, there were similar conversations, during the air war in Syria under the Obama administration, which also arguably kind of passed the 60-day clock. And Democrats at that point argued that the president is the commander-in-chief, needs to be given wide berth. Of course, the same arguments Republicans are making now. So we've certainly seen kind of a bipartisan, years-long effort of kind of forking over what is again very clearly written in the Constitution as Congress's power. Although of course the president is also constitutionally commander-in-chief. So there's kind of bifurcated powers, but clearly one side of that equation has won out.
These votes too also I think can have huge potential political impact, because sometimes these votes have been very defining in campaigns and in ways that we don't always expect. Like, I can't predict the future on this one, but when you look at public opinion about the war in Iran and we don't know where it leads, like having these votes either for or against it could, in the long term, potentially have a pretty significant political impact.
Yeah, I certainly think we're looking at a week when you talk about those kind of votes that could show up in political advertisements or could be actually talked on the campaign trail. I think we're going to see a lot of those amendment votes with the reconciliation package and the vote-a-rama today, of votes that are going to be very difficult for a Susan Collins, even a John Husted. Now that there's been polling showing him down against Sherrod Brown, see Dan Sullivan. Though it'll be difficult for them to take in the Senate, and I think the same thing in the House of these members who are not going to necessarily want to be on record 8 times for what's clearly a pretty unpopular war.
Yeah, I took within about a minute of the gavel falling on that vote before I got a text from somebody who works for House Democratic campaigns, said that's a lot of Republicans who voted for that war. And that's how they're going to be painting it. It's been a long time since foreign policy was a really important issue in campaigns, but this one kind of has that connection.
Potential, I think.
I think because it ties so much to gas prices and inflation, and people don't see it as much of a foreign policy
issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Looking ahead a little bit, if you can, I know we're always focused on what we did this week, but are there things next week that you're sort of keeping your eye on to see if they actually get it done?
Next week, there's been a few other bills that were on the floor this week, kind of about kind of fraud and kind of looking at there's been this Republican effort to kind of root out fraud. We saw a bill that passed mostly along party lines this week to kind of root out multiple people who are repeat offenders in terms of child care fraud. That was a bill that passed this week.
This is in response to Minnesota and all
Yes, I think so. It's kind of, that kind of broader issue of kind of, of fraud that, J.D. Vance is the task force on. So that was kind of a partisan vote this week, but there was also a rule to set up a vote that presumably will come up soon next week. And while that one was partisan, there is a bipartisan bill that I do expect to come up soon, the kind of No Go Students Act. And this is kind of it's a somewhat similar bill that is about basically this idea of ghost students are people that are kind of registering with FAFSA, the college aid, federal college aid, but aren't actually going to college, and they're defrauding the government. I believe I was looking. There's all these different estimates, but hundreds of millions of dollars they're defrauding the government out of, and that was a bill that did pass, kind of an anti-fraud bill that did pass on a bipartisan basis out of committee. And the rule set up for a vote didn't happen this week, it was pushed, but probably next week. And so that's kind of an interesting kind of side-by-side of two kind of fraud, somewhat similar fraud bills, but that one is expected to get Democratic support of this issue of, there's a lot of community colleges and smaller colleges that are being defrauded out of a lot of money because of these ghost students.
Because the students apply through FAFSA, get the money, and then just never go to school.
Exactly, they're not
and
actually.
And they're supposed to send the money to the college instead.
Exactly right, and so this bill would kind of set up a much stronger identity verification regime that would try to root out and try to ensure that the people that are registering for FAFSA are actually then attending the college, not just taking it.
I actually had no idea that was as significant of a problem as it is.
Yes, it's hundreds of millions of dollars.
Also, having filled out a FAFSA many years ago, it's a lot of effort to go through to get a relatively small amount of money. If you're talking about Pell Grants and different types of financial funding, it's not a ton of money that you get.
That is true, but another thing is that especially, it's interesting to bring that up, especially with AI, they've been seeing a huge uptick in this issue because you're exactly right. These are pages and pages in such long detailed forms, but obviously that's everything that AI you could fill out in an instant. and I think they're seeing people who are filling out tons of these, kind of blanketing the system with AI-generated forms of this, and so that's a bill that's supposed to come up soon to try to root some of that out.
That feels like one of those things that's pretty bipartisan, or am I wrong?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
So it passed bipartisan out of the Education Labor Committee, and I believe is expected to be kind of a bipartisan vote when it comes to the floor. Bobby Scott, the ranking member, has supported it.
This may sound like a dumb question from an old guy, but in terms of college students and younger students, you know, how much of an issue has a burning issue has college cost and loan debt been? It doesn't seem to be as much of a front burner issue as it was 5 years ago, 4 years ago. And is that just because people know that it's not going to be resolved with this president, this administration?
I think that's probably part of it, yeah. I mean, I think there's probably several issues that I think you see a lot of young Democrats who's definitely put a lot of pressure on the Democratic administrations, but then I think issues that don't always get as much attention, Republican administration. I will say I don't think this is necessarily contributing to a change in the political attention to it. If you look at college costs have somewhat stagnated, certainly not going up as much as they used to be, not necessarily going down, but so perhaps that is contributing. You know, the fact that I think after several years of just seeing costs rising and rising and rising, now seeing it a little bit flatten is maybe taking the heat off a bit. And then also I think, you know, just in terms of a political issue, I think one thing that comes up with that is I think it's certainly a very intensely felt issue to a certain kind of segment of college-educated, you know, voters. I just think those are voters that are not necessarily as. If you look at the young voters that are most kind of in, you know, kind of the swing category, that are kind of most being contested by the two parties, I think that's less that category. And so I think after Democrats kind of spent a lot of political capital on it during the Biden years, but are now kind of discovering that isn't necessarily the cohort of young voters that they most kind of need to bring over to their side.
It is actually interesting that obviously there's a reality of that this administration isn't going to care about the issue the same way that a Democratic would, but you don't hear Democrats talking about that issue with isn't much intensity as they did going into the last election, and it does feel like one of those issues where like they got burned a little bit. They touched the flame and they got burned, and they've kind of walked away. I don't want to say walk away, but certainly de-emphasized.
Yeah, I think there's certainly truth to that. I think, you know, to bring up another bill that got passed this week is interesting too, because I think it falls into a similar category of Democrats talking a lot less about climate change, and I think a lot less focused on that. I think maybe similarly having spent a lot of political capital, not seeing, you know, kind of political advantage from it. But there was a package, another bipartisan package that passed this week of 6 different bills in the House focused on geothermal energy. It's kind of this interesting issue that unites Republicans who like it as kind of, there's a lot of oil and gas states that also have a lot of geothermal projects that kind of helps them, not as much as, you know, so it's not changing the money around as much as moving to wind or solar would be. And then Democrats like it because it cuts carbon emissions, and that was a package bill that had everyone from Mike Kennedy of Utah sponsored bill to AOC, and that passed by a voice vote, and theoretically will kind of curb carbon emissions. And I do think it's interesting that you do see issues kind of travel, like you're talking about, kind of to being from salient to not as much, and now we have seen lately though some geothermal bills, some nuclear energy bills. Seems like that's a little bit where the climate conversation is moving towards these sorts of energy sources that are a little bit more bipartisan and are able to kind of go under the radar, even though kind of the more kind of flashy climate legislation, I think Democrats seem largely to have dropped.
Are there like clear leaders on the geothermal issue? In that I think that when we talk about oil or other issues with gas, it's like the oil and gas states, you know, but is geothermal national or is it regional?
I think it's honestly, what's interesting about geothermal, and I think why it's gotten more bipartisan support than wind and solar, it's similar to some of the oil and gas states because they're similar, you know, this is geothermal is kind of the heat from under the ground, kind of can use some of the similar fracking techniques. I know Utah is a big state where there's, I know just of those 6 bills that were in that package, Mike Kennedy, Celeste Malloy, they both had bills in that package, and that's kind of a state with a lot of geothermal projects, and they've been kind of big promoters of it, I know. But I think it's honestly, it's more similar coalitions which has allowed it to be more bipartisan, and so, you know, something Democrats can point to that is cutting carbon emissions without kind of, I think, the more controversial political valence that kind of wind solar has kind of been attached to.
Nuclear,
Right.
Is it harder in weeks like this where Mike Johnson only has the House in for 2 days to put together the...
They're still getting stuff done. They're still, you know, that's a big, you know, that geothermal bill, again, you know, if we're not seeing big climate legislation, but, you know, still seeing some nuclear bills, some geothermal bills, those are cutting carbon emissions. Those are kind of achieving these kind of, it's a pretty major push that it didn't get a lot of attention, but could still have big kind of policy implications.
Was there any sense from the committees as to when that might come to the full floor?
Which?
The geothermal.
That passed this week. That passed by a voice vote.
Yeah, that passed by a voice vote
this week, yeah.
My apologies.
Yeah.
Senate side? Is there a...
Not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly the kind of hopes. I mean, again, it passed by a voice vote, so that would obviously seem to suggest some unanimity behind it, but not sure if there are kind of senators that might object if it were brought up to unanimous consent or what the timeline on that is. I'm not positive.
That's kind of one of those issues that might happen all of a sudden in a final bunch of amendments on something like a reconciliation bill, perhaps.
That is true. Yeah, a lot of vehicles for it.
The modern Congress isn't about building just a coalition. It's about finding the train that is leaving the station.
And getting as much on it as possible.
Yeah, you pile it up and pile it up.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Gabe.
Thank you.
That's going to conclude this week for us. If it's important to the 535, it is important on behalf of all of us here. I'm going to ask unanimous consent on a motion to adjourn until 11 a.m. next Tuesday, June 9th.
Without objection?
We'll see you next week.